Hey legends! Welcome to Monkey D. FIC. Buckle up for today's story. What if Luffy joined the Demon Slayer Corps? A like and subscribe goes a long way. Now let's jump in. Chapter 1. The shore at the end of the sea. The storm had no name. That was the thing about storms in the Grand Line. They didn't need names. They didn't announce themselves with darkening skies or the slow crawl of clouds on the horizon. One moment the Thousand Sunny was skimming across glittering blue water with Nami shouting coordinates, and Usopp screaming about something that probably wasn't actually dangerous, and the next the sea itself seemed to fold, like someone had grabbed the horizon with both hands and yanked it sideways, and the world went white and loud and wrong. Luffy remembered reaching for the railing. He remembered Zoro's voice, sharp through the thunder, "Luffy, grab something." He remembered thinking that the wave looked less like water and more like a white wall taller than any building he'd ever seen, curling over the Sunny like a hand about to close into a fist. And then there was nothing. Just cold. And dark. And the sensation of being pulled in every direction at once, his rubber body stretching and snapping back, until even that stopped and there was only the quiet. He woke up face down in mud. Not ocean floor mud. Not the kind of mud that tasted like salt and dead fish and the deep sea's particular brand of dark. This mud was brown and rich and smelled like pine needles and something burning, somewhere far off. It was mountain mud. Land mud. Luffy pushed himself up with both hands and spat a mouthful of it onto the ground. Bleh. He sat up. Blinked. Looked around. Forest. Dense and old, the kind where the trees had been growing so long they'd developed opinions. The light coming through the canopy was thin and gold and going fast, late afternoon sliding toward evening, the sky above the treetops the deep bruised purple of a day deciding to end. Somewhere nearby, water was running over rocks. Birds were calling, but not the right birds. Not any birds he recognized. Luffy turned in a slow circle, hands on his hips. No ocean. No Sunny. No crew. He stood there for a moment with his hat, still on his head, soaked through and caked with mud, dripping onto his shoulders. Then he scratched the back of his neck and looked up at the sky. "Okay," he said to no one in particular. He didn't say it with worry. He didn't say it with fear. He said it the way you'd say it after spilling your drink, a small acknowledgement of a situation that needed dealing with. His crew was somewhere. The sea was somewhere. He'd find both. He always did. What he needed right now was food, because his stomach had moved past empty into the kind of hollow ache that made it hard to think about anything else. He started walking uphill. He smelled the smoke before he heard anything. Then he heard the flies. Not a peaceful forest sound, flies. Too many of them, moving in that particular agitated way that meant something had drawn them. Luffy's nose wrinkled. He knew that smell. He'd been a pirate long enough to know it without wanting to. He pushed through a stand of young cedar trees and stopped. The house was still standing, but only just. The walls had been torn through in places, not broken, not smashed, but torn, like something with enormous hands had pulled at them. The sliding doors were off their tracks. One of the paper screens still swayed in the faint mountain breeze, half shredded, casting broken shadows across the Engawa. Around the house, in the snow that hadn't quite melted at this elevation even as spring tried to take hold, there were bodies. A woman. Children. The positioning of them told a story Luffy read in one glance and felt land in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. He stood there. He didn't look away. Most people looked away from things like this. Luffy looked because the people who'd been here deserved at least that much, to be seen, even now. To not be something a stranger averted his eyes from. His jaw was set. His eyes were flat and dark under the brim of his hat. Then he heard the sound. A groan. Low and pain-soaked, coming from behind the house. Luffy moved. He came around the corner of the building and found two things, a boy, and something that had once been a girl. The boy was face down in the snow, which had gone red around him. He was breathing. Luffy could see the shallow rise and fall of his back, the trembling that went through his whole body with each inhale. Dark hair fanned out from his head. He was maybe Luffy's age, or close to it, wearing a checkered haori that was torn at the shoulder. On his back he carried a wooden box, strapped tight, and the box was moving. Scratching sounds came from inside it. Small, frantic impacts of something trying to get out, or trying to get to the boy, or both. The thing that had once been a girl crouched between Luffy and the boy. She was young. She had dark hair and pale skin and eyes that had gone pink-red at the edges, the pupils narrowed to something inhuman. Her fingernails were black and sharpened. The kimono she wore was torn and dusty and still recognizable as something a person would wear, which was somehow the most jarring detail. She had a muzzle of thick rope tied around her jaw. Her head was snapping from side to side in short, choppy movements, and she was making a sound somewhere between a growl and something Luffy couldn't name. But she wasn't moving toward the boy. She was crouched between Luffy and the boy. Facing Luffy. Luffy stopped walking. The creature met his gaze. Her pink eyes were wide and furious, and underneath the fury there was something, not quite human, but not quite not human either. Something aware. Something that was very specifically aware of exactly where the unconscious boy behind her was. Luffy tilted his head. "Are you protecting him?" he asked. The creature's growl stuttered. Her head tilted to match his, just a fraction, the movement so reflexively human that it obviously surprised even her. "You're his sister," Luffy said. Not a question. Something in the way she'd positioned herself, the particular angle of her body, all of it angled to keep herself between whatever came and the boy behind her. Luffy had seen that before. He'd done it himself, plenty of times. He recognized it bone deep. The creature, the girl, made a sound that wasn't a growl. It was shorter. Softer. It cracked a little in the middle. Luffy walked forward. She lunged. She was fast, genuinely fast, the kind of speed that came with something beyond human, and her arms swung in an arc that would have taken someone's head off. Luffy leaned back, rubber neck stretching away from the claws by a generous margin, and she stumbled through the empty space where his head had been and landed in a crouch, spinning around, shocked. He was already crouching in front of her. She swung again. He ducked under it. She went for his throat. He let her grab it, which gave her about a half-second of confusion, her fingers closing around his neck and finding it elastic, yielding, wrong, before he gently caught her wrist. Not to hurt her. Just to stop. She thrashed. She was strong, strong enough that a normal person would have been thrown clear, but Luffy planted his feet and held on, and after a moment of furious struggling she stilled, panting hard, her pink eyes locked on his face. "I'm not going to hurt you," Luffy told her. His voice was exactly the same as if he'd been saying let's eat dinner or nice weather. Totally level. Totally certain. "And I'm not going to hurt him either. Okay?" The girl stared at him. Her chest heaved. Then, very slowly, the furious tension in her began to change, not disappear, not soften exactly, but shift, the way a guard dog shifts when it's starting to reconsider. She sniffed the air. Sniffed it again. Rubber, probably. And sea salt. And nothing that smelled like threat. Luffy let go of her wrist. She didn't attack him. She pulled her wrist back slowly, watching him, and then turned and moved back to the boy's side with that same eerie, instinct-driven protectiveness. She settled into a crouch beside him and watched Luffy with those unsettling pink eyes. "Okay," Luffy said. He moved toward them, sat cross-legged in the snow a few feet away. "First, is he alive?" The girl made a sound. An affirmative sound, the shape of it unmistakable even without words. "Good." Luffy looked the boy over. The wounds were serious, but the blood had slowed. "What's your name?" "Can you?" He mimed, pointing to himself. "I'm Luffy." The girl blinked. Then, slowly, she raised one hand and pointed to herself. Her mouth moved around the rope muzzle, working carefully. "Nezuko." The word was half-formed, rough, like she'd had to excavate it from somewhere very deep. But it was there. Luffy grinned. Nezuko. Good. He pointed to the unconscious boy. And him? She pointed to him the same way she'd pointed to herself. Tanjiro. Tanjiro. Luffy nodded. He looked at the boy, Tanjiro, with the specific focus of someone already moving to the next step. All right, Nezuko. I'm going to help him, okay? I'm going to help both of you. That's it. That's all. Nezuko stared at him for a long moment. Then she moved aside, just a fraction, not all the way, but enough. An offering. A provisional trust, given by a creature that shouldn't have been capable of trust anymore and was apparently stubborn enough to manage it anyway. Luffy moved in. It was fully dark by the time Tanjiro opened his eyes. Luffy had started a fire, had found an intact section of the house with dry wood stacked against the wall, and cleared a space in the snow away from the bodies so it wouldn't be the first thing Tanjiro saw when he woke up. Not because Luffy thought avoiding pain was always the right move, but because right now he was already in enough of it. Nezuko hadn't let Luffy carry Tanjiro. She'd done it herself, her small hands gripping him with that otherworldly strength, and she'd settled him near the fire with a care that was so painstakingly gentle it made something ache in the back of Luffy's throat. She'd sat beside him since, the box on her back open now, her in it, not because she couldn't come out, but because the fire's heat apparently made her sleepy, and she'd looked at Luffy with one eye before closing both and trusting him, for reasons Luffy suspected had more to do with her instincts than any rational thought. Tanjiro's eyes opened. They were dark red, the color of garnets, and the first thing they did was focus with painful clarity on the fire, and then on Luffy. For a moment he just stared. Hey, Luffy said. He had a stick in the fire and was poking at the embers in a way that served no real purpose but kept his hands busy. You were pretty messed up. I cleaned the wounds. I'm not a doctor, but I've seen enough of them to manage. Tanjiro sat up, winced hard, pressed a hand to his side, but didn't lie back down. His eyes swept the space and then snapped to the box. He grabbed for it. Nezuko, she's fine. She's sleeping. Luffy tilted his head toward the box. She wasn't happy about me being here at first. We worked it out. Tanjiro stared at him. You. His voice was wrecked. Raw from whatever had happened here. His eyes were red in a different way from Nezuko's, not inhuman, just grief-wrecked, the specific devastation of someone who'd seen too much and was still breathing on sheer stubbornness. You know what she is? A demon, right? Luffy said. I figured that out. Tanjiro's whole body tensed. She didn't hurt anyone, Luffy said before Tanjiro could do whatever he was about to do. She protected you. She protected herself. That's it. And when I talked to her, she talked back. He shrugged. That's good enough for me. Tanjiro stared at him across the fire. His expression was doing a complicated thing, relief and grief and something almost desperate cycling through one after another. Then he pressed his forehead to the ground in a bow so deep it looked like it hurt. Thank you, he said. For the fire. He couldn't finish. Don't do that, Luffy said, uncomfortable. Just eat something. I found rice in the house. It's not great, but it's there. Tanjiro lifted his head. There were tears tracking through the dried blood on his face, and he didn't seem to notice. He looked like someone who'd cried so much the process had become involuntary. He sat up properly, and accepted the bowl Luffy pushed toward him. They sat in silence for a while. Just the fire and the dark forest and the sound of Nezuko's small, slightly inhuman breathing from the box. Then Tanjiro said, Who are you? Luffy. Monkey D. Luffy. He pointed at his chest. Pirate. I know there's no ocean nearby. It's complicated. He waved a hand. Where are we? What country is this? Tanjiro blinked at him with the particular blink of someone recalibrating their understanding of a conversation. This is Japan. We're in the mountains. Taisho. He stopped. You don't know what country this is? I told you it's complicated. Luffy poked the fire again. What are demons? I know what a demon is where I come from. They're just strong enemies, mostly, but the ones here seem different. She's not evil. She's just transformed. Something changed her. Tanjiro's eyes dropped to the fire. When he spoke, it came out slow and heavy, the weight of each word something he was choosing to carry rather than having a choice about. A demon did this. He meant the house. The family. He didn't have to specify. A demon came in the night and... He stopped. Swallowed hard. Nezuko was the only one still alive when I came back. And she'd been changed. Turned. I don't know why she kept her mind, no one else ever has. But she did. She does. She's still my sister. His voice was absolutely iron on the last 4 words. No room for argument. No room for anything at all. Yeah, Luffy said. I know. Tanjiro looked at him. I can tell when someone's a good person, Luffy said simply. Not like a special power. Not like mystical insight. Just the way you'd say I can tell when it's going to rain, confident and comfortable and completely sure of itself. She is. That's all I needed. Tanjiro was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was slightly different. Still raw. But with something new threading through it, something younger, like he'd just been given something he hadn't expected to need. What are you going to do now? He asked. You said you don't know where you are. Find my crew, Luffy said. Eventually. First. He tilted his head and looked at Tanjiro with eyes that were simultaneously lazy and absolutely direct. What are you going to do? Tanjiro's hands tightened around the bowl. There's a man named Sakanji Kadaki. He lives on the mountain. He knows about demons. He can help Nezuko. There's a way to cure her. To make her human again. I'm going to find it. No hesitation. No I hope or maybe. Just the flat, simple certainty of someone who'd already made their decision and the rest of the world was just going to have to accommodate it. Luffy looked at him for a moment. Then he stood up, brushed snow off his shorts, and settled his hat. Okay, he said. I'll come. Tanjiro blinked. You what? Why? You need help carrying the box up a mountain and you've lost a lot of blood. Luffy said it the way a completely obvious thing deserves to be said. Also I'm hungry and there's probably food at the top. That's... Tanjiro seemed to search for an appropriate objection and couldn't quite land on one. You don't have to do this. It's dangerous. The demons, Tanjiro, Luffy said patiently. Yes? I just talked a demon into not eating me by grabbing her wrist. He grinned, and it was the specific grin that had made Marines second-guess themselves and Sea Kings reconsider their direction. I think I'll be okay. Tanjiro stared at him. Then something happened on his face, not quite a smile, too close to tears for that, but something that was trying to become one. He turned back to the fire. Okay, he said quietly. Then, thank you, Luffy. Stop thanking me. Eat your rice. Morning came gray and cold. Nezuko emerged from the box when the sun was barely up, moving into the light with the cautious propriety of someone testing a new arrangement. She looked at Luffy. Luffy waved. She looked at Tanjiro, and Tanjiro gave her a smile that cost him something, the way all his smiles probably did now, and she moved to walk beside him with her feet barely making sound in the snow. They climbed the mountain. It was not a short climb. The path was old and steep and wound through cedar groves that let the light in sideways, throwing long pale stripes across the snow. Tanjiro managed the elevation change with the steady persistence of someone who'd grown up working at altitude, his breathing controlled, his pace even despite the bandaging wrapped beneath his haori. Nezuko moved in absolute silence beside him. Luffy bounced. Not literally, though occasionally literally, when a section of path became interesting enough to warrant bouncing off. He'd stretch up to grab a branch and swing forward, or compress himself low to look at something in the snow, or simply walk with the particular quality of forward motion that is less walking than falling in the desired direction and catching yourself. He catalogued the world around him with the same total attention he gave to everything: the shape of the trees, the sound the wind made through them, the tracks in the snow that Tanjiro would stop and examine and name. Bear. Fox. Deer. Something that made Tanjiro's face tighten and Nezuko press closer to her brother, something that was not any of those. How many demons are there? Luffy asked, not particularly alarmed, just curious. More than anyone knows, Tanjiro said. Most of them aren't as intelligent as the strong ones. Most of them just hunt. They can't go in sunlight. They can only be killed with certain swords or… He glanced at Luffy. There's a poison. Wisteria. Some of them are afraid of it. Most swords can't kill them. They can hurt them. They heal from almost anything, though. Hashira, the strongest slayers, their blades are different. There's a breathing technique, a fighting style, and when you master it enough your sword changes color. Only then can you… He stopped. I watched someone use it once. Before. He didn't elaborate on before. Luffy nodded, filing the information away. And this Urokodaki. He teaches that? He's a former Hashira. Water breathing. He's… Tanjiro's expression did something complicated. They say he's harsh. That he's lost many students. But he's also the one who might believe me about Nezuko. He's the only one I can think of who might. Because he's seen weird things before. Because he has a good heart. Tanjiro said it simply and firmly, as though this were the more important criterion. Luffy grinned. He liked this kid. They walked in silence for a while. Then Nezuko, from her position slightly behind them, made a sound, not a growl, not a word, but a small, considered him, and reached out and tugged very gently on Luffy's sleeve. He looked back. She was pointing at his hat. Oh? He took it off and held it out toward her. She examined it with those pink eyes, head tilting, then reached out and touched the rim with one fingernail. A question in the gesture. Someone important gave it to me, Luffy said. He took it back, set it on his head, pushed it down to the right angle. I keep it safe for him. Nezuko made a small sound that was somehow unmistakably icy, and let go of his sleeve, and went back to walking. Tanjiro was watching him. When Luffy looked over, Tanjiro glanced away, but not before Luffy caught the expression, the one that was still learning how to exist alongside grief, still finding places for small things like curiosity and warmth to fit inside a life that had just been broken and was putting itself back together with whatever was at hand. You carry something too, Tanjiro said eventually. Not accusing. Just noting. My crew, Luffy said. They're out there somewhere. I can't go back until I find them. That must be frightening. Luffy considered this genuinely. No, he said finally. They're all really strong. And they're waiting for me. I just have to get back to them. That part I'm not worried about. He looked up at the sky above the tree line, calculating nothing in particular, just looking. The waiting's the annoying part. I hate waiting. Tanjiro laughed. It was a small laugh, surprised out of him, clearly the first thing to escape that specific muscle in some time. It sounded a little rusty. He put a hand over his mouth like he'd done something inappropriate, and then looked faintly mortified by his own reaction. Don't stop, Luffy said, grinning sideways at him. Sorry, you don't have to be sad the whole time. He said it without judgment, without the particular pitying tone people used when they said things like that, which usually made them meaningless. He said it like a practical observation. Being sad is fine. You should be sad. But you should also laugh when something's funny, and eat when you're hungry, and sleep when you're tired. Otherwise you run out of fuel. Tanjiro looked at him for a long moment. My father said something like that, he said quietly. Your father sounds smart. He was. A beat. He was. They kept climbing. Urokodaki's house was exactly where the mountain's mood suggested it would be, past a section of path that became genuinely unpleasant, marked by old wooden totems with painted faces that someone with a strong spiritual investment had placed at intervals between the trees. They rattled faintly in the mountain wind. Nezuko shrank slightly when they came into view, pressing to Tanjiro's side. "It's fine," Tanjiro told her. "He's a good man." The house itself was small and solidly built, tucked against the mountainside like it was trying to become part of it. There was smoke from the chimney. Through the trees came the sharp, clean smell of cedar ash and something medicinal. Tanjiro approached and knocked. Silence. "He might not answer," Tanjiro said, with the quiet anxiety of someone who'd walked a very long way to maybe find no one home. "He values only the—" The door opened. The man who opened it wore a Tengu mask, smooth and carved and absolute, giving nothing away. He was shorter than Luffy would have expected from a former elite warrior. He stood the way serious people stood, grounded, still, aware of every point in space around him without appearing to look at any of them. His eyes were invisible behind the mask. His hands were still at his sides. He looked at Tanjiro. He looked at the box on Tanjiro's back, from which small sounds of agitation had resumed. He looked at Luffy. There was a silence that lasted approximately 3 full seconds, which doesn't sound like much, but in Urokodaki's specific quality of silence felt significantly longer. "You," he said to Tanjiro. "I know your face. Your father was Tanjiro Kamado." He said it with the certainty of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading people. Tanjiro's breath caught. He bowed. "Yes. I've come because I know why you've come." Urokodaki's gaze moved to the box. To the sounds coming from within it. "She's in there. Your sister. She is. She still has her mind. She protected me. She's still. I'll determine what she is," Urokodaki said, not unkindly but with a precision that didn't leave room for argument. He looked at Luffy again. "Who are you?" "Luffy." He met the masked gaze without any particular deference but also without aggression. Just direct, uncomplicated eye contact. "I came with them from the bottom of the mountain. I'm looking for my crew." "He's not a slayer," Tanjiro added quickly, as though this needed clarification. "Clearly." Urokodaki looked at Luffy for a moment more, and whatever he read in what he saw made him, not relax exactly, but recalibrate. He stepped back from the door. "Come in. All of you. Feed the girl before she gets any louder." The inside of the house was simple, deeply clean, and felt like a space that had been shaped by a person's will over a very long time. There was a central hearth, the fire banked low. There were practice weapons along one wall. The whole place smelled of cedar and cold and something that was just Urokodaki, a particular austere presence that had seeped into the wood. Nezuko came out of the box slowly, helped by Tanjiro, and stood in the room looking uncertain. Urokodaki looked at her. She looked at him. He held perfectly still. She held perfectly still. Then, very deliberately, he bowed to her, not deep, but real, and said, "You are a guest in this house. You will not be harmed here." Nezuko stared at him. Then she bowed back, a little awkwardly, the mannerism obviously pulled from somewhere in the person she'd been before. Luffy watched this from the corner, and decided he liked Urokodaki, which had not been a given going in. There was food. Urokodaki produced it without fanfare: rice, pickled things, dried fish, and Luffy ate 3 people's worth while Tanjiro talked, the whole story coming out halting at first and then faster, the way stories did when you'd been holding them alone for too long. Urokodaki listened without interrupting. He watched Nezuko the entire time Tanjiro spoke, not threatening, just observing, cataloging, the way a doctor takes a patient's measure. When Tanjiro finished, there was a silence. "She should not have her mind," Urokodaki said. "By every law of how demons work, the conversion should be complete. She should be hunting." "She's not," Luffy said from his corner. He'd finished eating and was now lying on his back looking at the ceiling, completely comfortable. "She protected Tanjiro from me when she thought I was a threat. That's a person, not a monster." Urokodaki looked at him. "You tested this." "By accident. It told me what I needed to know." Urokodaki looked back at Nezuko. His masked face was unreadable, but his voice, when it came, was measured and certain. I will take her in. I will train Tanjiro, if he is willing to endure it. There is a selection, a final test. If he passes, he will be a demon slayer. He paused. This is not a path with a long life at the end of it. I know, Tanjiro said. He'd stopped eating somewhere during his own story. He looked at Urokodaki with eyes that were red-rimmed and absolutely steady. I know that. I'm going anyway. Urokodaki was quiet for another moment. Then he turned to Luffy. And you? Luffy tilted his head up from the floor. What will you do? Urokodaki asked. I told you. Find my crew. The mountain is dangerous at night. You'll stay until you know where you're going. It wasn't an offer, exactly. It wasn't an order either. It was just a statement of how things would be, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd been deciding how things would be for a very long time. Luffy settled his hat over his eyes. Yeah, he said. Okay. That night, Nezuko sat between Tanjiro and Luffy while Urokodaki explained the history of the Demon Slayer Corps, its origin, its hierarchy, the nature of the demons, the one that made all others. Muzan Kibutsuji, he called him. The first demon. The demon who'd killed the Kamadu family and made Nezuko into what she was. When Urokodaki said the name, Tanjiro's jaw set. When Urokodaki said the name, Nezuko went very still. Luffy opened his eyes under his hat. He said nothing. But something had clicked into place, the same click that happened when someone wronged a person he was going to take care of. Not rage. Not the loud, blazing anger that got written about in wanted posters. Something quieter. More absolute. Whoever this person was, whatever this Muzan was, he'd done this. He'd destroyed this family and left these two to put themselves back together with nothing but each other and the stubbornness of people who refuse to stop loving what they've loved. Luffy had opinions about that. He kept them to himself for now, because now wasn't the moment for them. Now was the moment to let Urokodaki talk, and let Tanjiro listen, and let Nezuko sit with her small shoulder warm against her brother's arm, her pink eyes reflecting the fire, alive against every expectation. But later, there would be a conversation about Muzan Kibutsuji. It just wouldn't be a conversation Muzan would enjoy. 3 days later, when Luffy had eaten Urokodaki's food reserves down to a concerning degree and learned the rough geography of the mountain through the simple method of running up and down it until he knew where everything was, Tanjiro found him sitting on the roof watching the sunset. You're staying, Tanjiro said. Not a question. Did I say that? You've been running the trails. You already know the mountain better than students who've been here for months. He climbed up beside Luffy and sat, his legs hanging off the edge. You don't have anywhere to go. And you... He stopped. Luffy glanced at him. You could have left any time, Tanjiro said. The first day. After you helped us up the mountain. You didn't need to stay. He looked out at the line of mountains going purple in the last light, the sky above them streaked orange and deep blue. Why? Luffy thought about it honestly, the way he always thought about things that mattered, without performing the thinking, without dressing it up. You needed someone, he said finally. And I was there. And I didn't want to leave you by yourself with all that. A pause. Also Nezuko would worry. Tanjiro made a choke sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob and was somehow both. You're very strange, he said. People say that. Luffy pulled his hat down against the mountain wind. I'll stay until you're done training. Then we'll see. He tilted his grin sideways. Maybe by then my crew will have found a way to get to me. They're good at finding me when I get lost. The sun finished going down. The first stars appeared. From inside the house came the small sounds of Urokodaki preparing the evening's work, of Nezuko moving around the kitchen with the careful domesticity of a girl who'd been a person first, and was still a person, still trying, day by day, against every rule of what she'd become. Tanjiro sat on the roof beside someone he'd known for 3 days and trusted the way you trusted ground, not because you tested it, but because it had simply, consistently, held. "Thank you," he said. "I told you to stop doing that," Luffy said. "I know," Tanjiro said. "Thank you anyway." Below them, the mountains settled into night, and the demons in the darkness went about their old and terrible work, and at the top of the slope a light was still on. It would stay on. Chapter 2: The Boy Who Doesn't Breathe Right. The training started before sunrise. Urokodaki was already outside when Tanjiro stumbled through the door in the gray pre-dawn, his breath misting in the mountain cold. He'd expected to find his new master waiting with instruction. What he found instead was Urokodaki standing in the middle of the clearing, and Luffy already out there with him, upside down, walking on his hands across the frozen ground. Like this was a perfectly normal way to spend the hour before breakfast. Tanjiro stared. "He woke me up," Urokodaki said, with the specific tone of a man who'd been woken up and made a decision about how he felt about it. "He asked if there was anything to do. I told him to run the boulder course. He ran it twice, broke a boulder, apologized, and started doing that." He gestured at Luffy's inverted form. "I have no explanation." Luffy flipped right side up, landing with a crunch in the snow. "Oh, you're awake! Good. Urokodaki said you're starting today." He was grinning. Not the grin of someone who'd been awake too long, the grin of someone for whom being awake and grinning were simply the same state. "What do we do first?" Urokodaki said. "Do not do anything. You are not my student." "I know." Luffy shrugged, completely unbothered. "But I'm here anyway." There was a silence. Urokodaki had the particular stillness of a man considering several responses and discarding each one. Then he turned to Tanjiro. "Total concentration breathing," he said. "That is what you'll learn. That is the foundation of everything. Before you touch a sword, before you run a trail, before you do anything I ask, you'll learn to breathe." He looked at Tanjiro steadily. "It will take time. It is not a natural thing. Your body will resist it." "How long did it take other students?" Tanjiro asked. "My best student managed it in 4 months. Then I'll do it in 3, Tanjiro said simply. Urokodaki regarded him. 2 months, Luffy said. Both of them looked at him. For Tanjiro, Luffy clarified. He'll do it in 2 months. He's determined. Determined people are faster. He said this with the casual certainty of someone reporting observable weather conditions. What's the breathing for? It maximizes the oxygen in the blood. Increases physical capability far beyond normal human limits. Allows the body to do things it otherwise couldn't. Urokodaki's masked face was turned toward Luffy with an expression that was probably evaluative behind the wood. Your body is not normal. Breathing techniques would likely affect you differently. Probably. Luffy agreed pleasantly. He looked at his arm, stretched it out to twice its length, let it snap back. I don't really breathe in fights. I mean, I breathe, but I don't think about it. Urokodaki was quiet for a moment. You use your body as a weapon. Yeah. Without training. I trained. Just not in breathing. He patted his stomach. My grandpa threw me into things. I learned by not dying. It's a pretty good method. Urokodaki looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then, with the decisiveness of someone who'd accepted many inexplicable things over a long career, he turned back to Tanjiro and began the first lesson. The days fell into a rhythm that was hard and simple and somehow satisfying in the way that hard, simple things are. Tanjiro trained. He trained the way he did everything, with his whole self, not frantically but consistently, the steady application of everything he had to the thing in front of him. He ran the boulder-dotted trails in the dark and came back bleeding from rocks he hadn't seen. He practiced breathing in the cold until he passed out. He meditated by the river and listened to the water until he could hear the pattern in it that Urokodaki kept describing. He got up and did it again. Luffy ran beside him on the trails. Not to train, or not only to train, but because Tanjiro ran better when someone was next to him. This was simply something Luffy had noticed and acted on without making a thing of it. He didn't push. He didn't race. He just ran alongside, sometimes on the path, sometimes off it, sometimes sideways down a cliff face because he'd seen something interesting. Yuro Kodaki watched this happen without commenting. He was a man who understood that training was not only the thing you directly taught. He'd learned this the hard way, across a career measured in lost students. In the evenings, Nezuko sat with them. She was changing, slowly, by increments that were hard to see day to day but became visible week to week. She slept in her box during daylight, the demon's inevitable submission to sunlight, though it harmed her less than others, and came out at dusk. She'd sit with Tanjiro while he did his breathing exercises, and sometimes she'd breathe with him, the muzzle making it awkward, her brow furrowed with the concentration of someone who didn't need to breathe but was doing it as a kind of solidarity. She'd watch Luffy try to demonstrate sword stances he'd immediately abandoned in favor of punching things, and occasionally make the specific sound that, in Nezuko's vocabulary, corresponded to laughing. She was getting better at sounds. Slightly more range, slightly more nuance. Luffy talked to her constantly, one-sided conversations that weren't actually one-sided because she responded through expression and gesture, and the occasional syllable dug up from wherever the demon transformation had buried them. He described his crew with the enthusiasm of a person who never considered that something was amazing until he tried to explain it to someone who never heard of it. Zoro would like it here, he told her one evening, watching her try to fold a piece of paper into the shape of a flower, something she'd apparently been able to do before and was relearning with her altered hands. He'd try to fight everything on this mountain. He'd probably try to fight Yuro Kodaki on the first day. He considered this. He'd lose. But he'd try. He grinned. Then he'd train until he didn't lose and try again. That's what Zoro does. Nezuko made a sound that asked a question. He's my swordsman. He's got 3 swords. Luffy held up 3 fingers. Nami's my navigator. She'd look at these mountains and immediately want to know the highest elevation point, and whether there were any good things to steal. Usopp would be terrified of the demons. He'd be really terrified. Very loudly. But he'd fight them anyway in the end. He always does. He's braver than he acts. He counted on his fingers. Sanji would cook everything. He'd complain about the fish, but he'd make it taste amazing. Robin would want to know the history of the whole thing, the core, Muzan, all of it. She'd find out things even Yuro Kodaki doesn't know. His voice had gone a little different, the grin a little different, the specific quality of missing people who you know with total certainty you'll see again. Nezuko had stopped folding. She was watching him with her pink eyes and her tilted head, the almost complete paper flower in her hands. She made a sound. 3 syllables, careful and distinct. Want to meet? Luffy looked at her. The grin came back, full and certain. You will, he said. I promise. She held out the paper flower. It wasn't quite right. The folds were a little off, the angles slightly too sharp from fingers not quite the same shape they'd been, but it was recognizable. She was giving it to him. He took it with both hands. Held it with the same care as his hat. The trouble with Yuro Kodaki's training traps was that they were everywhere, and they were very good, and Tanjiro learned this the hard way approximately 400 times in the first month. The trails had been rigged with snares, triggers, hidden drops, pressure plates that released small but convincing projectiles when stepped on. The point wasn't to hurt him. Yuro Kodaki had calibrated everything with the precision of someone who'd been doing this for decades, but to force him to sharpen his senses. To pay attention to everything. To feel the world through more than sight. Tanjiro had an advantage in this that Yuro Kodaki had identified immediately. His sense of smell was exceptional. Genuinely, unusually exceptional, beyond what normal variation explained. He could scent the rigged soil before a trap, could smell the metal tang of a wire strung at any height, could catch the particular difference in air pressure that preceded one of the rope's snares. He still hit most of them. But he hit them less. Luffy hit every single trap exactly once, immediately worked out the mechanism, and then avoided them all for the rest of the morning, at which point Yuro Kodaki recalibrated the course and Luffy hit each new one exactly once in a different way. This process was somehow more frustrating for Urokodaki than watching students struggle with them repeatedly, and he eventually confined Luffy to a different section of the mountain, which Luffy discovered had different traps, which he found extremely entertaining. "You're doing it on purpose," Tanjiro said from the ground where a snare had left him hanging by his ankle 6 feet up. Luffy stood below him, eating a rice ball. "I'm not doing anything on purpose. This is just how I am. You keep triggering the traps to see what they do. You enjoy it. They're interesting." Luffy looked up at him with his neck stretched slightly to see the hanging angle better. "Also, you can get down. Just bend your knee and grab the rope above the knot." Tanjiro craned his neck, worked out that Luffy was right, and got down. He stood in the snow and brushed himself off, and they kept walking. After a moment, Luffy stretched his arm up and snapped off a cedar branch that was going to hit Tanjiro in the face from 15 feet ahead. Tanjiro hadn't even seen the trigger. "How did you?" He looked at the branch, at the trigger mechanism, at the space between. "You can see traps from that distance?" "Smell them," Luffy said around the rice ball. "Metal's got a smell. Rope does too." He shrugged. "I've been in a lot of dangerous places. You start noticing things." Tanjiro stared at him. Something shifted in his expression, not quite jealousy, closer to the specific frustration of someone who'd been trying very hard to do something that someone else did without thinking. "Urokodaki says I have an exceptional sense of smell," he said. "It's my greatest advantage." "Yeah, it is," Luffy agreed. "It's good. It's really good. Better than mine at distance, I think. You can smell people, who they are, what they're feeling. That's different. That's more specific." He looked at Tanjiro. "You smelled my intentions when we met, didn't you? Before you decided to trust me." Tanjiro opened his mouth. Closed it. "Yes. See. That's yours. That's not something you can train into someone." They walked. The morning light moved through the trees in long columns. "Luffy," Tanjiro said. Why don't you use a sword? Urokodaki offered to teach you. He said he's never offered anyone who wasn't his student before." "I know." Luffy looked at his fist, flexing it once. "I've got a style. It's mine. Swords aren't wrong, Zoro's the best I've ever seen with one, but they're not me. I'd be worse with a sword than I am with my hands. There's no point being worse." He crunched the last of the rice ball. "Why? You think I should?" "I think..." Tanjiro hesitated. "I think the demons here can regenerate from almost anything. The special blades matter. What you do, you can fight them, but can you kill them?" "Yes." Luffy was quiet for a moment. He thought about the demon on the first night, the speed and the strength. He thought about what Urokodaki had said since about the hierarchy, the 12 Kazuki, the upper moons, the distances between a regular demon and the things that sat at the top of that scale. "If I can't," he said finally, "I'll figure out a way. I always do." He looked at Tanjiro with eyes that held no bravado and no doubt, just the specific practicality of someone for whom finding a way was simply a constant fact of life. "And until then, I can keep them busy while you kill them. That seems useful." Tanjiro thought about it. About Luffy grabbing Nezuko's wrist in the dark and holding her there with no weapons and no visible fear, just his rubber body and his absolute refusal to be impressed by things that were trying to harm him. "Yes," Tanjiro said. "That seems useful." The breathing came, as Urokodaki had promised, at its own pace. Tanjiro sat by the river at dawn, 3 weeks in, with the water running fast and cold below him, and listened. He'd been listening for days. Urokodaki kept saying hear the pattern, and he could hear the water, he could hear the individual sounds of it, the rush over the larger rocks and the eddy behind them and the shallower babble in the wide sections, but the pattern had stayed out of reach. Something that unified them. Something underneath. He breathed. In through the nose, counting. Out through the mouth, counting. The cold air pressed against his lungs. He let it. Didn't resist. There. Not heard. Felt, in his blood, in his chest, a sudden full-body awareness of the oxygen moving through him, the warmth of it, the brightness. His heartbeat changed tempo. His vision sharpened. The river below him went from a blur of motion to something he could track individually. Each drop, each current, each point where the surface tension broke. He gasped and lost it. He sat for a moment, hard hammering, and then very carefully found the breathing again and held it, 5 seconds, 10, lost it again. But this time losing it had felt like dropping something. Which meant he'd been holding it. He ran back to the house. Urokodaki heard the footsteps and had his masked face turned toward the door before it opened. Luffy, who was doing something inadvisable with the training dummies in the yard, immediately stopped doing it. Tanjiro burst through the door, breathing hard from the run. "I found it," he said. Urokodaki was still for a moment. Then he nodded, once, slowly. "Show me." Tanjiro breathed. The air in the room seemed to change, not visibly, not dramatically, but in the way a room changes when the light hits something that had been in shadow. Tanjiro's whole bearing shifted, his shoulders lowering, his eyes brightening, the trembling around his hands settling into something still and controlled and present. Urokodaki watched him for 30 seconds. Then, again. Tanjiro did it again. "You'll lose it and find it many times," Urokodaki said, when Tanjiro released the breath. "The goal is to make finding it instant. To not need to search." He paused. 36 days. Tanjiro blinked. "Is that? My previous best was 47. Another pause, freighted with the specific weight of lost students and long years. "Your father would have been proud." Tanjiro pressed the back of his wrist against his mouth and held very still. Luffy watched from the doorway. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Final selection wasn't explained to Luffy because he wasn't a student. He found out about it the way he found out about most things, by asking Tanjiro a direct question at dinner, and receiving an increasingly alarmed explanation in return. "You go to the mountain," Tanjiro said, his voice careful and even because if he started to be afraid now, at the table, in the firelight, it would be harder to stop. Mt. Fujique saying. "It's covered in wisteria. The wisteria keeps normal demons from leaving, but..." He picked at the edge of his bowl. "They put demons on the mountain. Captured ones. Ones that can't be contained anywhere else. And you survive for 7 days. 7 days, Luffy repeated. However many survive get to be demon slayers. And if you don't survive, then you don't. Simple. Flat. Tanjiro had accepted this the way he accepted most terrifying things, by looking directly at it, and deciding it was simply a fact to be walked through. Luffy nodded, turning this over. "I'm coming," he said. "You're not a student, I know. The mountain is, Luffy, the demons there. Urokodaki has said some of them have been killing slayers for decades. They're not the kind I am." He caught himself, the unintended comparison. "They're not the kind Nezuko is. They're Tanjiro." Luffy put his chopsticks down. He looked at Tanjiro with absolute attention, not the alert, searching look he gave to things he found interesting, but the steady, direct look he gave to people that mattered. "You're going up a mountain full of demons for 7 days. Alone. I'm not going to sit here and eat rice for 7 days. Tanjiro opened his mouth. "I'll stay out of the fights that are yours," Luffy said. "I'm not trying to do your test for you. But I'm not being there." The silence stretched between them. From the box in the corner came Nezuko's awake sound, a small, deliberate noise that was unmistakably a vote. Tanjiro looked at the box. Looked at Luffy. Something in him that had been braced against an argument it hadn't needed to have let go. "Okay," he said. "Good." Luffy picked up his chopsticks. "When do we go?" 2 weeks. "Then I've got 2 weeks to figure out if I can actually kill demons." He said it the way you'd say I've got 2 weeks to learn a new card game, a practical timeline for a manageable problem. Tanjiro stared at him. "How will you? I'll figure it out," Luffy said. "I always figure it out." He figured it out in 4 days. The mechanics of demon death, Urokodaki had explained, came down to two things in the absence of a Nichiren blade: sunlight, or decapitation clean enough that the regeneration couldn't keep pace. It wasn't the blade itself that killed them, it was what the blade did and how it did it. A blade enhanced by breathing technique moved faster than a demon could heal. Clean decapitation. Luffy spent 4 days in the woods above the house doing things to trees that made Urokodaki come and look and then go back inside without comment because there was genuinely nothing to say. The speed wasn't the problem. Speed had never been a problem. The issue was force distribution, hitting with enough focus power at the right point, the way a blade concentrated its edge. His rubber body had no edge. He had impact and momentum in abundance, but impact spread. He needed to concentrate it. He was lying in the snow thinking about this on the 4th day when the answer arrived, as answers tended to, in the form of something he'd been doing for years without articulating. He sat up. Stood. Looked at the tree in front of him. Breathed, not the breathing technique, not the measured water rhythm that Tanjiro was still drilling, but his own thing, the way he gathered himself before a serious hit, the pulling inward of everything before it exploded out. He focused it down. Narrowed it. The way you narrowed a river to make it go faster, same water, same force, smaller channel. He hit the tree with the edge of his hand. The tree came apart cleanly, in the specific way that spoke of a single localized force rather than spread impact. He looked at his hand. Looked at the tree. Huh, he said. He tried again. Different angle. Slower build-up. The result was similar, not perfect, not as clean as a blade, but close enough for what he needed. Close enough for a demon's neck. He went back to the house and ate whatever wasn't nailed down, because that level of output was hungry work, and he found Tanjiro sitting on the engawa in the last light of afternoon with Nezuko's hand in both of his, talking to her quietly about their mother. The way the mountain light fell across the two of them, pink and gold, the way Nezuko was watching her brother's face with her ancient eyes that were still somehow entirely the eyes of a younger sister. Luffy looked at them for a moment, and then looked away and went inside to raid the kitchen. He had what he needed. Empty Fujike-san hit you with the wisteria before the demons. The purple blossoms were everywhere, woven through the trees like something deliberate and lovely, the whole mountain wearing them the way a stage wears curtains, beautiful and functional and slightly unnerving if you knew what was behind them. The smell was extraordinary. Heavy and sweet, and underneath it something sharp that Luffy's body didn't react to at all. Other candidates had gathered at the gate. 12 of them, various ages, all with their uniforms and their Nichiren blades and the particular expression of people who'd trained very hard for something they weren't sure they'd survive. None of them looked at Luffy. Then all of them did. He was wearing his usual, the open red vest, the short pants, the hat. No blade. No uniform. He stood at the gate with his hands in his pockets, and surveyed the mountain with the unhurried curiosity of someone deciding which trail to take on a pleasant hike. One of the candidates, a tall girl with long pale hair who stood with the coiled precision of someone who'd been training considerably longer than the others, gave him a flat, measuring look. "You're not a candidate." "Nope," Luffy said. "Then why are you here?" "My friend's here." He tilted his head toward Tanjiro, who stood beside him trying to look like this was normal. "I go where he goes." The girl stared. Then she looked at Tanjiro. Then she looked back at Luffy with the expression of someone who'd filed him under a category that didn't fit any of her existing categories and was not going to be resolved tonight. The gate opened. 7 days. Survive. The first demon found them inside an hour. It was large, much larger than the one at the Kamadu house, the kind of large that spoke of many years and many deaths, its body distorted by whatever accumulation of power came from that much consumption. It had too many arms. 4 of them, or maybe 6, it was hard to count when they were moving that fast, snapping through the underbrush, reaching for the nearest warm body, which was Tanjiro. Tanjiro was ready. He dropped into his stance, water-breathing, first form, and the blade came up and the water flowed through the motion the way Urokodaki had shown him, the strike going precisely where it needed to go, the demon's neck, the motion clean and controlled and genuinely accomplished for a student who'd been at this for less than 2 months. The demon's head came free. It took 3 seconds to die. Tanjiro was breathing hard, the first real fight breathing that was different from training regardless of how much you prepared. He looked at the fading demon. Then at his hands. Then up at Luffy, who was sitting on a branch above him eating a piece of salted fish he'd brought from the house. "Good," Luffy said around the fish. "Did you?" Tanjiro stared at him. "Did you just watch that? You had it. Why would I jump in?" He looked at the fading demon with calm interest. "The form was right, but you hesitated before the final motion. The water slowed. Urokodaki would tell you that." Tanjiro opened his mouth. Closed it. "You noticed that. I've watched you train for 2 months. I know what your water looks like when it's right." He dropped from the branch, landing in the leaves. "Come on. There's more." There were more. The mountain was not subtle about this. It distributed its demons across the terrain with the specific generosity of a place that had been accumulating them for decades, and they came in waves determined by territory and hunger and the particular nocturnal logic of things that lived to hunt. Tanjiro fought them. Not all of them were as manageable as the first, and some of them required 3 or 4 attempts, and one of them, a demon with the ability to distort sound into something physically concussive, sent him into a tree hard enough that Luffy appeared from the darkness and stood between them while Tanjiro shook his head clear. The demon looked at Luffy. The demon hit Luffy with a concentrated blast of sound force that would have liquefied a normal person's organs. Luffy absorbed it. Stretched slightly. Snapped back. "Huh," he said. He looked at the demon with the specific expression of someone who'd just found a new thing to think about. "Do that again." The demon, deeply confused, did it again. Same result. Luffy's rubber constitution spread the force harmlessly across his entire body, the kinetic energy losing coherence in the elastic material. "Interesting," Luffy said. Then he crossed the distance between them, grabbed the demon's head with both hands, and applied the concentrated edge technique he'd spent 4 days developing. The head came off cleanly. Tanjiro, back on his feet, stared. "I told you I'd figure it out," Luffy said. He looked at his hand. "The angle matters. Next thinner on demons than I expected. Relatively easy. That was, how did you? I'll explain later." He looked at the treeling. "Something bigger is coming. I can feel it." He could feel it in the ground, a vibration, low and rhythmic, the movement of something very large through dense forest. Not crashing. Moving through it, the specific horror of something that didn't need to avoid trees because trees moved for it. The thing that came out of the forest had been a demon for a very long time. You could see it in the age of it, the way centuries of kill accumulation had distorted its human origin into something vast and layered, like growth rings on a tree. It was 12 feet tall at the shoulder, and its face remembered being human the way a ruin remembered being a building. Its eyes were multiple and golden and old. Very old. It looked at Tanjiro. Then at Luffy. It spoke. The voice was like something collapsing. "I have killed 47 Demon Slayer students on this mountain," it said conversationally. "The flesh of slayers is different. Something about the training." It tilted its massive, wrong head. "The small one with the checkered coat, water-breathing by the form. Urokodaki's student." Its many golden eyes narrowed. "And the other one? I cannot identify the style." "That's because I don't have one," Luffy said. He was standing with his hands in his pockets. He looked up at the demon the way he looked up at most things, with the comfortable attention of someone at eye level with the world, regardless of how far above them it actually was. "You killed 47 people," he said. "Yes. And you're proud of it." "I am indifferent to it," the demon said. "Pride is a human concern. I simply remember every face. It is a consequence of long memory. They stay with me." Something shifted in Luffy's face. Not anger, not the hot, visible kind. Something colder and more certain, like a door closing on a room from which things don't come back. That's worse, Luffy said quietly. Then he moved. The fight was not elegant. The demon was genuinely powerful, genuinely old, with physical strength accumulated across decades of consumption, its regeneration fast and thorough, and it fought with the unhurried efficiency of something that had done this enough times to strip away unnecessary motion. It hit Luffy 3 times in the first 30 seconds. Each time he compressed, absorbed, snapped back, slightly further away, recalibrating. Tanjiro came in from the side, water-breathing, rapid forms, harrying attacks at the joints, the thinner points of the demon's enormous limbs. The demon swatted him away without looking. He hit the ground, rolled, came up, came in again. The breathing held. The water held. Luffy drew the demon's focus. He let it hit him. He let it grab him. A huge hand closed around his midsection and the demon squeezed, expecting something to break, and instead Luffy's body compressed and expanded inside the grip until the grip was simply holding a very springy and unimpressed person. "You're rubber," the demon said. Almost curious. "Yep," Luffy said. Then he got his arm free, coiled it back, and brought it forward with everything behind it. Gear second. Not announced. Not named aloud in this context, just activated, the blood pumping faster, the air shimmering slightly around him, the motion that followed happening faster than the demon's ancient eyes could fully track. The neck. The concentrated edge. The full force of Luffy's accelerated body behind a strike as focused and clean as he'd ever managed. The demon's head left its shoulders. The silence was enormous. Tanjiro, from 20 feet away, breathed. He watched the demon begin its slow dissolution, the ancient body unwinding, the accumulated power releasing, the golden eyes losing their light one by one, slowly, like candles at the end of a long ceremony. Luffy watched it go. His expression was not triumphant. It was the expression of someone watching 47 unnamed faces finally stop being remembered by something that should never have been alive to remember them. "Sleep," he said, to no one in particular. It wasn't clear if he meant the demon or the 47. Maybe both. On the 7th day, they walked out of the gate together. 5 candidates survived final selection. Tanjiro was one of them. Luffy was not on the official list, not a candidate, not formally anything in the Corps' records, but the people at the gate who'd seen Tanjiro come out whole in a year when older, more prepared candidates hadn't, registered the rubber-bodied young man walking alongside him and made internal notes. The pale-haired girl from the first day had survived too. Her name, Luffy learned at the gate, was Kaneo Tsuyuri. She said nothing when they emerged. She looked at them both with her large, still eyes, and then looked away, and that was the whole of it. There was a crow waiting for Tanjiro. Small and black and deeply opinionated, as crows tended to be. It landed on his head and announced his name 3 times and told him he'd been assigned his first mission, and then said several things about Luffy that were rude enough that Luffy considered whether crows could be argued with. He decided they couldn't. He let it go. "You're a demon slayer," Luffy told Tanjiro. "Yes." Tanjiro looked at the crow on his head with the expression of a man getting used to a very strange new life. "I am." "Good." Luffy stretched. "Let's go tell Nezuko." Tanjiro looked at him sideways. "What about you?" "You're not, officially, I'm with you," Luffy said. Same certainty. Same complete simplicity. That's enough. Tanjiro watched him for a moment, the straw hat, the grin, the complete, unshakable equanimity of someone who'd walked through 7 days of demon-infested mountain and come out not more hardened but somehow more himself, as though difficulty had no power to change what he essentially was. "Yes," Tanjiro said quietly. "I suppose it is." They walked down the mountain together as the morning came up gold and full over the trees, the light catching the wisteria and making it shine, beautiful and deadly and riotously alive, the mountain breathing its old mountain breath all around them. Somewhere at the bottom, a girl in a box was waiting. They went to her. Chapter 3, Thunder, Beast, and Absolute Chaos. The crow arrived 3 days after they got back from the mountain. Not Tanjiro's crow, a different one, smaller and meaner looking, that landed on Urokadaki's gate post and announced Tanjiro's first mission with the particular self-importance of something that had been given an important job and intended to perform it to an audience. The location was a town called Asakusa, initially, for Nichiren Blade Collection, and then east, a village where people had been vanishing from a specific house over the course of 2 weeks, 3 families, no bodies, no witnesses, just absence. Urokadaki listened to the crow. Looked at Tanjiro. Looked at the box where Nezuko was sleeping through the morning light. "You'll carry her," he said. It wasn't a question, just an acknowledgement that this was the shape of things now, that the Kamadu siblings were a unit, and that unit moved together. "Yes," Tanjiro said. Urokadaki looked at Luffy. Luffy was sitting on the gate post 6 inches from the crow, looking at it with the focused interest of someone trying to understand something. The crow looked back at him with the profound existential alarm of an animal that had never encountered rubber. "You'll go with him," Urokadaki said to Luffy. "Obviously," Luffy said, without looking away from the crow. Urokadaki was quiet for a moment. "There will be other slayers. There is a system. A hierarchy. You are not part of it." He said this the way you'd say the stove is hot, informational, no judgment, just the shape of a fact. "This will create problems." "Probably," Luffy agreed. "You don't care." "I care about Tanjiro making it back in one piece." He finally looked away from the crow, at Urokadaki. "The hierarchy can figure itself out." Another silence. Then, with the decisiveness of a man who'd accepted stranger things, Urokadaki went inside and came back out with enough food to last them to the next town. He pressed it into Tanjiro's hands. He stood in the doorway and looked at Tanjiro for a moment with the specific quality of attention that was everything he wasn't going to say. "Come back," he said. "I will," Tanjiro said. The crow relocated to Tanjiro's head with an air of having completed its business. Nezuko's box shifted on Tanjiro's back as he turned, a small internal adjustment, the particular quality of movement that was her waking to the fact that they were leaving and deciding, provisionally, to approve. Luffy dropped off the gate post. Settled his hat. They walked down the mountain. They heard Zenitsu before they saw him. The sound reached them first, a high, spiraling vocal performance of pure distress that echoed across the valley below the mountain, the specific acoustic signature of someone doing something unfortunate with their lungs. Birds vacated the surrounding trees in a mass exodus. A fox that had been sitting peacefully in a patch of morning sunlight gave the noise a long look and removed itself from the situation. Luffy stopped walking. Tilted his head. "Is that a person?" "I think so," Tanjiro said uncertainly. "Is he dying?" "I don't." Tanjiro sniffed the air. His brow furrowed with the specific concentration of his particular gift. "He's not in danger. He's afraid. Really, genuinely afraid. But nothing is threatening him right now. So he's just doing that. Apparently." They found the source around the next bend in the path. A boy. Roughly their age, with yellow hair the color of old straw and large, wet, expressive eyes that were currently producing tears at a rate that suggested a structural problem. He was sitting in the road with his knees pulled up and his hands over his face, and he was crying with a commitment that implied he'd been doing it for a while and saw no immediate reason to stop. Beside him was a Nichiren sword in its sheath and a small bundle that held what appeared to be the entirety of his worldly possessions. He heard their footsteps and looked up. His eyes went to Tanjiro. Then the box on Tanjiro's back. Then Luffy. He stared at Luffy. Took in the hat, the vest, the complete absence of a sword, the rubber quality of the arm currently waving at him. His crying stopped. Not because he felt better, it stopped the way a machine stops when you've introduced a component it can't process. "Hi," Luffy said. "Are you okay?" The boy stared. Then, as though this simple question had punctured something, he grabbed Luffy by both lapels with an urgency that suggested Luffy was the first solid object in a drowning situation. "No," he said desperately. "I am not okay. I became a demon slayer because I thought there would be women. There are no women. There are only demons and mountains and this crow who keeps insulting me, and I've been sitting here for an hour because the mission is that way, and there are demons that way, and I can't. He inhaled sharply. Are you a demon slayer? You don't have a sword. Why don't you have a sword? Who goes demon hunting without a sword? What is? His eyes dropped to Luffy's arm, to the visible quality of it that registered as wrong even to someone who wasn't paying careful attention. What's wrong with your arm? It's rubber, Luffy said. Silence. Rubber, the boy repeated. Yep. The boy let go of Luffy's lapels. He looked at Tanjiro with the eyes of someone searching for a coherent authority. He's Luffy, Tanjiro said, as though this were a complete answer. I'm Tanjiro. What's your name? Zenitsu. Agatsuma Zenitsu. He sniffed. Wiped his eyes. Looked at the road with the expression of someone making an active effort to be a person. I'm supposed to be going to, there's a mission. A house. People disappearing. I can't. He looked up. I can't do it alone. You're not alone, Luffy said. We're going to the same place. Come on. Zenitsu blinked. We are? We are now. Luffy had already started walking. You can walk and cry at the same time, right? Yes, technically, then come on. Tanjiro says there's probably food in the town. There is? Zenitsu scrambled to his feet. He grabbed his pack and his sword and fell into step beside them with the reflexive self-preservation instinct of someone who very much did not want to be alone in a valley that had demons in it. His crying had reduced to occasional sniffs. The town has food? Every town has food, Luffy said. Right. Right, yes. That's yes. Zenitsu pulled himself together by increments, using the promise of food and company as scaffolding. He walked with them down the road. After a moment, his gaze went to the box on Tanjiro's back. What's in the box? My sister, Tanjiro said. Zenitsu processed this. Your sister is in a box. Yes. Why is your sister in a box? A beat. Then the box opened a crack, one dark-haired, pink-eyed face appearing in the gap. Nezuko looked at Zenitsu with frank, direct curiosity. Zenitsu fell down. He did not fall dramatically. He simply ceased to be upright, collapsing sideways into the grass beside the road with a sound like a large question mark. He lay there for a moment. Then he sat up with his hands pressed to his face, and something that was not quite coherent language coming from behind them. She's incredibly, she's my sister, Tanjiro said again, firmly. She's wonderful, Zenitsu said reverently through his hands. The box closed. Luffy was already 10 feet down the road. Come on. The Tsuzumi mansion sat at the edge of a cedar grove, set back from the main road by a path that looked like it had been charming once, and had been working very hard to forget it. The house itself was large enough to have multiple wings and a layered roof line, but whatever architectural dignity it had once possessed had been replaced by something that immediately made Zenitsu take 2 steps backward and make a small noise. The drum sounds came from inside. Not music, not quite. More like sound that was organizing itself into something intentional, a rhythm that had a destination, a rhythm that changed the space it occupied. Even from outside, the house felt wrong at the edges, like a painting someone had tried to fix by rotating it. I don't like this, Zenitsu said. The sounds are structural, Luffy said, his head tilted. He was listening with the focused quality of someone actually mapping what he heard. They're changing the inside. Rooms rotating, probably. The drum is the mechanism. Both Tanjiro and Zenitsu stared at him. How do you know that? Tanjiro asked. Ships, Luffy said. You live on a ship long enough, you learn what the sounds mean. What's moving, what's stopping, which direction. This is the same thing. He looked at the house. The demons in the middle. The drums rotate outward from a center point. As if to confirm this, a sound came from the house, muffled, terrified, human. A child's voice. The 3 of them looked at each other. Luffy was already moving. He hit the front door and went through it, not by breaking it but by grabbing the handle, compressing himself in, and letting the door's motion carry him inside faster than a person should be able to move, the hallway receiving him in a rush of air. Tanjiro was a half-second behind. Zenitsu made it to the Engawa and stopped. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the sliding door, and the sound of drums all around him and his whole body doing a persuasive impression of someone who was about to leave. He didn't leave. He sat down on the Engawa instead, back to the door, and waited, because Zenitsu's specific relationship with courage was that he had it. He absolutely had it, but it operated on a delay and occasionally required him to be sitting down first. Inside, the house moved. This was the only way to describe it. It moved, the architecture flexing in response to the drum rhythms, rooms rotating clockwise and counterclockwise on a logic that was spatial but felt almost musical. Halls that had been straight became angles. Rooms that had been accessible became walls. The demon's domain, Luffy realized as he bounced off a wall that hadn't been there 2 seconds ago, was not primarily physical. It was geometric. The house was the weapon. He found this out by slamming into a ceiling that was suddenly a floor. He landed, shook his head, and immediately reoriented. Normal people would have lost their sense of direction in 30 seconds. Luffy spent his life on a ship in the Grand Line, where up and down were suggestions rather than rules, and he had an internal compass that owed nothing to visible landmarks, and everything to some innate and stubborn sense of where he was in three-dimensional space. He walked along what was currently a wall, now a floor, and listened for the drums. Tanjiro's voice, muffled by 2 rotations of architecture, came from somewhere to his right. He could hear the breathing pattern, water breathing, active, which meant Tanjiro had found something to fight. He turned toward the sound. The demon found him first. It came through a wall, literally through it, the architecture parting for its master with the smooth cooperation of a thing that recognized its owner. It was not as physically large as the demon on the mountain, but it moved with the unsettling efficiency of something that had complete environmental control, its tambourine drum limbs generating percussive explosions with every impact. It hit Luffy twice in rapid succession, concussive drum strikes that would have shattered bone, and stood back to watch him fall. Luffy was still standing. "Huh," the demon said. It had a face that had once been human and a voice that was trying to remember how that worked. "Hi," Luffy said. "You're Kyogai, right? The drum demon?" The demon's face shifted. Surprise, or something adjacent to it. "How do you know my name?" A crow told Tanjiro. "Tanjiro told me." He looked at the rotating room around him with genuine interest. "This is impressive. Did you build this or?" Kyogai rotated the room. The floor became the ceiling. Luffy bent his knees, absorbed the drop, landed. The walls became the floor. Luffy walked along them. The ceiling became a wall. He stepped up onto it. Kyogai stared. "You're not disoriented," he said. "No." Luffy had been watching the drum placement, the percussion instruments carved into Kyogai's body, each one affecting a different spatial axis. He'd mapped 4 of them in the first exchange. "You've been hurting people because you want them to recognize that your manuscripts are good." Kyogai went very still. It was a strange stillness. Not the stillness of anger, something more complicated. The stillness of someone who'd been seen in a way they hadn't expected. "The crow told Tanjiro that too," Luffy said. Not unkindly. "You were a writer. Before. And you kept writing after. And no one valued it. They said it was worthless," Kyogai said, and something in his voice was very old and very tired. "Every human who came to this house, I showed them. And so you ate them. I ate them." He said it without apparent remorse, but with the specific emotional flatness of someone who'd long since stopped knowing what to feel about something they'd done too many times. The blood makes the mind sharp. The more you consume, the better the thoughts become. I became strong enough to write anything. To create anything. He looked at Luffy with his ancient, terrible eyes. "And there is no one left to read it." Luffy looked at him for a moment. He looked the way he'd looked at Nezuko in the first seconds of meeting her, the thing where he saw what was actually there, without the framework of what he was supposed to see. "That's sad," he said. Plainly. Without condescension. Then he closed the distance between them before Kyogai could rotate the room again, and Luffy's hand found the angle he'd spent 4 days on the mountain developing, and the force went where he put it, and it was over. The house stopped moving. The rooms sorted themselves back into something resembling architecture as Luffy made his way through them. He found Tanjiro in what had been a rotating corridor, breathing hard but intact, his blade wet and his eyes already doing the thing they did, looking at where the demon had been with the complicated grief of someone who couldn't fight without feeling the full weight of what they were fighting. A boy, maybe 11, stood behind Tanjiro, clutching his Haori. Small face, wide eyes, clearly convinced he was about to be saved and eaten in rapid succession. "You okay?" Luffy asked. The boy looked at him. "Yes?" "Good. Come on, both of you." "There are more," Tanjiro said. "I could smell other children, deeper in the lower wing. I'll find them. You get this one outside." He found 2 more children in the lower wing, a room that hadn't rotated but had locked from the outside by whatever architectural logic the drum demon imposed on his house. He took the door off its hinges, just lifted it, which took about 2 seconds, and the children, a pair of younger siblings who'd been holding each other in the dark, looked up at him with the enormous eyes of people for whom rescue had not been completely expected. "Hi," he said. "You're okay. Come on." They came on. Outside, Zenitsu was still sitting on the engawa. He had not moved. He was sitting with his eyes closed and his hands flat on his knees, and his breathing, Luffy stopped and registered this, surprised, was actually correct. Total concentration breathing, the pattern Tanjiro had described, genuinely present in Zenitsu's respiration. He was doing it unconsciously, the way you hum a song you've memorized too well to need to think about. Then a sound came from inside the house, the last of the architecture resettling, and Zenitsu's eyes snapped open and he was on his feet and his sword was drawn, and for exactly 1 second there was someone standing there who was nothing like the crying boy on the road. Then Luffy stepped out of the door with 3 children and Zenitsu's legs gave out and he sat back down. "You're alive," he said, to Luffy and then to Tanjiro and then to the children. "You're all alive. Why is everyone alive? I've been sitting here preparing a very sincere final prayer." "Who are you praying for?" Luffy asked, handing the 2 younger children off to Tanjiro. "Myself, mostly." He looked at the children, and his expression, which had been oscillating between terror and relief, settled into something genuine and warm, the kind of warmth that didn't need to perform itself. He looked at each child in turn, made sure they were real and whole and actually present, and let out a breath. "They're okay." "They are," Tanjiro confirmed. Zenitsu looked at the small boy still clutching Tanjiro's Haori. "What's your name, kid?" "Shoichi," the boy said, with the dignity of someone who'd been through a very bad night and was keeping himself together. "Shoichi." Zenitsu nodded. He looked at the house. "I heard everything. The drums, the sounds. I was listening from out here. I could track where everyone was." He said it apologetically, like this was something he needed to justify. Luffy looked at him. "You were listening?" "I can't help it. I hear things other people don't. I could tell where each person was inside by their movement." "I was." He looked at his hands. "I was getting ready to go in if it got bad enough." He said this like it was a small thing. It wasn't. Luffy registered the specific quality of courage this represented, not the absence of fear but the very deliberate management of it, and filed it away in the part of him that catalogued people according to what they actually were rather than what they appeared. "You're useful," Luffy said. Zenitsu blinked. What?" "Your hearing. It's useful." He started walking toward the road. "You coming?" Yes, wait, where are we going?" "Next town." "I'm starving." "You're always starving," Tanjiro said. "Yes." Zenitsu scrambled to follow, his pack bouncing, the children falling into their wake with the instinctive gravity of people who'd decided these three were safe and were not prepared to be dissuaded. The crow on Tanjiro's head made a pronouncement about the successful completion of the mission. Tanjiro thanked it formally. The crow was not used to being thanked and seemed unsure how to receive this. They were 2 hours down the road toward the next town when the boar hit Luffy from above. Or not a boar. Almost a boar. Something wearing a boar's head and moving with the specific kinetic energy of a person who never once in his life considered that other people's bodies were also solid objects with feelings about being run into. Luffy hit the ground, bounced, rolled, came up in a crouch. His hat had stayed on. He looked at the thing that had just hit him with the direct, unhurried attention he gave to things that had earned his focus. The thing was a boy. Beneath the enormous dried boar's head he wore as a mask, the sounds coming out were agitated and immediate, and not entirely language. He had twin Nichiren blades, 2 of them, worn in a style that looked like it had been developed by someone who never seen actual kenjutsu, and had instead decided that the most correct way to hold swords was with complete personal commitment to whatever felt right. He was pointing both blades at Luffy. "I hid you," he said, with the tone of someone delivering surprising news. "You're still alive?" "Yeah," Luffy said. "I hit you hard." "You did." "I hit hard enough to kill bears." "I know. I felt it." The Boarmass boy processed this for a moment. His shoulders went back. The twin blades lowered half an inch. "You're a beast," he said, with sudden intensity. "What beast are you? You feel like something that lives in a place with no land." "I grew up on an island," Luffy offered. "Island beasts are weak." "I know." Luffy stood up, brushing himself off. "You're strong. What style is that?" The blades came back up. "Beast breathing," the boy said, with the emphasis of something sacred. "I created it. Alone. In the mountains. With the boars." He tilted his massive head. The boar skull moved with it, giving the whole interaction a surreal quality. "Are you a slayer?" "No." "Are you a demon?" "No." "Then why are you here?" "Walking." Luffy tilted his head at Tanjiro. "With him. He's a demon slayer." The Boarmass boy turned and looked at Tanjiro. Then at the box on Tanjiro's back. Then at Zenitsu, who had retreated behind Tanjiro with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd already assessed the situation and selected the appropriate response. "You," the boar boy said to Tanjiro. "What rank?" "Mizunoto," Tanjiro said. "Just started." "I'm lower than me." He puffed his chest. "I'm Inosuke. Hashibara Inosuke. I've slain more demons than anyone my age in these mountains." He looked at Luffy again. "Why are you not ranked?" "I'm not in the Corps." Inosuke stared. "But you're strong." "Yes." "How are you strong if you're not in the Corps?" "I just am," Luffy said, with the same simplicity he'd used to say "I just have brown eyes." It wasn't arrogance, it was just the truth stated plainly, the way Inosuke himself stated things. Inosuke pointed a blade at him. "I challenge you." "Okay. Right now?" "Sure." "You're not scared?" "No." Inosuke stood very still. Behind him, Zenitsu was whispering something frantic to Tanjiro that involved the words "What is happening and I want to go home." Tanjiro was watching with the expression of someone who was going to let this play out because he already knew stopping it wasn't an option. Inosuke launched himself. The speed was real, genuinely impressive, the beast breathing, compressing and releasing like a spring, his movement through three-dimensional space different from any trained style Luffy had seen, more animal than human in its axis points, attacking from angles that swords weren't supposed to reach from. The twin blades moved independently of each other, one always accounting for a dodge from the other. Luffy moved. Not away. Through, stepping inside the arc of the first blade, ducking under the second, catching Inosuke's leading wrist and redirecting the momentum sideways, which sent Inosuke past him, through the space where he'd been, and into a neat faceplant in the road's grass verge. A beat of silence. Inosuke came up. Grass in the boar skull. He turned around. His posture communicated an emotion that was halfway between outrage and fascination. Again, he said. Okay, Luffy said. 5 exchanges later, Inosuke was lying on his back in the grass, his twin blades planted point down in the road beside him, breathing hard. He looked at the sky. He said nothing for a while. Then, "You're better than me at this specific thing," Luffy said. "Your swords are actually terrifying. You can go angles I can't hit from." Inosuke sat up. He tilted his boar skull and looked at Luffy with an expression that was probably indignant, but was being complicated by something working against the indignation. "You're not mocking me," he said. "Why would I mock you? You're strong. People who beat me mock me." "That's stupid," Luffy said. "If you're strong and I'm strong, then we're more useful together." He shrugged. "Also, Tanjiro's going to need backup. Demons don't come one at a time." Inosuke looked at Tanjiro. Tanjiro looked back at him with the patient warmth of someone who was going to offer friendship regardless of the current social dynamic, and intended to wait as long as it took. Zenitsu had retreated approximately 4 feet further behind Tanjiro. "Is he always like this?" Zenitsu whispered. "I've only known him for a few days," Tanjiro whispered back. "That's not an answer." Inosuke got to his feet. He grabbed his blades. He looked at the 3 of them, Tanjiro, Luffy, the box, and Zenitsu's frightened face peering from Tanjiro's shoulder, and made a decision the way he made all decisions, fast and completely, with no apparent internal deliberation. "I'm coming," he said. "Okay," Luffy said. He'd already started walking again. "Can you find food? I'm really hungry." Inosuke stared at his back. "You just beat me and now you want me to find food. I'd beat you in a fight. You grew up in these mountains. Different skills." He looked back with a grin. "Can you or not?" The boar's skull shifted. Something about its angle suggested that Inosuke was experiencing an emotion he hadn't needed to experience in a while, the specific feeling of being seen accurately by someone who wasn't trying to perform the seeing. "I can find food," he said with dignity. "Great." He found food. A lot of food, actually, pheasant and river fish and wild vegetables that he produced from the forest with the pragmatic efficiency of someone who'd been feeding himself in the mountains for years. He built a fire without being asked. He cooked badly but generously, which Luffy appreciated on every level. They ate in a clearing as the afternoon went orange and the crows began their evening circuits. Zenitsu, who'd spent the first 30 minutes of camp setup keeping maximum distance from Inosuke, had gradually allowed himself to be herded closer by the smell of food, and was now sitting next to Luffy with the concentrated focus of someone eating something they hadn't expected to need this much. The box sat between Tanjiro and the fire, slightly open, Nezuko's eyes visible in the gap. She'd been watching Inosuke with the unreadable attention she gave to new things. Inosuke, who had been around approximately 0 humans for most of his life and had never developed the ability to look away from things he found interesting, kept looking at the box. "There's a demon in there," he said. "My sister," Tanjiro said. The iron tone again. The tone that turned 4 words into a full legal argument. Inosuke's head tilted. "She doesn't smell right." "She's a demon," Tanjiro said patiently. "She doesn't smell right for a demon." Inosuke pressed the boar skull closer to the box. "She smells like a person." The box opened another inch. Nezuko looked at the boar skull. The boar skull looked at Nezuko. Nezuko reached out very slowly and touched the nose of the boar skull. It made a hollow sound. Her eyebrows went up. She tapped it again. Tap. Hollow sound. Inosuke did not know how to handle this. No protocol existed in his experience for a demon touching his head accessory out of idle curiosity. He made a sound that was not quite language. "She likes it," Luffy said. "Don't explain it," Inosuke said, and pulled back. Nezuko watched him go with the patient, interested expression of someone who decided something was funny and was choosing not to make it an event. Zenitsu, who'd been watching this exchange with large eyes, said something under his breath that Luffy didn't quite catch but which had the shape of a thought about Nezuko being too good for all of them combined. "Zenitsu," Luffy said. "What?" "You're breathing earlier. When you were sitting on the Engawa." Zenitsu looked at him. Something defensive moved through his expression. "I was terrified." "I know. You were also doing total concentration breathing. Automatically." A silence. Zenitsu looked at his hands. "My master taught me," he said quietly. The performance fell away, just for a moment. "He taught me one thing. Just one. Thunder breathing, first form. I can't do any other form. It's the only thing I'm—" He stopped. "My master said I was a hopeless student. He said anyone else would have given up on me." He looked at the fire. "He didn't give up. So I kept going. But I can only do the one thing." "What does it do?" Luffy asked. Zenitsu was quiet for a moment. "It's fast," he said finally. "When I'm doing it properly, it's really fast." He said this with a kind of dissociated objectivity, like he was describing someone else's ability rather than his own. "I passed final selection. I don't know how. I was asleep for most of it." "Asleep?" Tanjiro said. "When I'm really scared," Zenitsu said, with remarkable self-awareness. "Sometimes I just go." He made a gesture with his hands that conveyed something flickering and total and beyond conscious control. "And apparently when I'm unconscious I'm better." Inosuke, who'd been eating through this entire conversation with the focused attention of someone processing information at his own pace, looked up. "You're better when you can't think." "That's unfortunately accurate," Zenitsu said. "Same," Inosuke said, with complete sincerity. Zenitsu stared at him. "We are nothing alike." "Same," Inosuke said again, with equal sincerity. Luffy watched both of them, and the grin that had been sitting on his face all day went slightly different, warmer, the specific warmth of someone looking at a thing that's becoming another thing before their eyes. "There's going to be another mission soon," he said. Tanjiro looked at him. "You don't know that. There's always another mission." He looked around the fire. Tanjiro with his careful eyes and his iron heart, Zenitsu eating with tears drying on his face from something that had made him cry 5 minutes ago and that he'd already half forgotten, Inosuke with his animal certainty and his borrowed pride, Nezuko watching all of them from her box with eyes that held a whole person's worth of understanding. "We'll figure it out." "Together?" Tanjiro asked. Not surprised. Just naming it, the way you name a thing that had been true for a while before anyone said it out loud. "Together," Luffy said. The fire popped. Sparks went up into the cedar-smelling dark. Somewhere above them, Tanjiro's crow said something rude and went to sleep. The mission came 2 days later. Not from the crow, from a wisteria house, the safe stations the Corps maintained for injured slayers, which they passed through to resupply, and where a pale, thin woman with kind eyes had listened to Tanjiro's report of the drum house mission and then said carefully that there were other slayers already dispatched to a location east and that they'd gone silent. "How many?" Tanjiro asked. 3. 2 days ago. She looked at the window. "The location is empty, Natagumo. We've been receiving reports. The mountain has something wrong with it. Something that's been there for a while." Her voice was very careful. "It is possible that what's on that mountain is beyond what we'll go," Luffy said. The woman looked at him with the expression people got when they tried to categorize him and ran out of categories. "You're not, we'll go," he said again. She looked at Tanjiro, at Zenitsu, at Inosuke, who was examining the window frame with the focused attention of someone who'd found structural irregularities. She looked back at Luffy. "The spider demons," she said quietly, "are not like normal demons. They act as a family. They coordinate. We don't know how. We don't know how many." She paused. "The threads. They control slayers. Make them fight each other." Her voice went very careful again. "If you go up that mountain, be careful who you raise your sword against. Tanjiro's face went through something complicated at the word family. Then it settled into the expression that was becoming familiar, the one that went looking for the hardest path and started walking it. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be careful." Outside, Luffy looked at the mountain. Even from here, you could feel it, not demons, not the specific animal threat of something that wanted to eat you, but something layered and deliberate and old. Something that had been building a long time. Inosuke was vibrating with the anticipatory energy of someone who'd been maintaining relative stillness for 2 days and was ready to stop doing that. "Finally," he said. "Zenitsu," Tanjiro said. "Don't," Zenitsu said immediately. "You don't have to," I said. "Don't." He had his arms crossed and he was looking at the mountain with the expression of a man making a decision he'd regret, and making it anyway. "I just need a minute." They gave him a minute. "Okay," he said. They went up the mountain. The trees closed over them, and the light went wrong almost immediately, the green of the canopy too dark, the spaces between the trunks too full of something that wasn't quite shadow. Threads caught the light at angles, silver, almost pretty, stretching between trees in patterns too deliberate to be spiderwebs and too numerous to have been there long. "Stay out of them," Tanjiro said quietly. "Are they the control threads?" Luffy asked. "I think so." Luffy looked at the nearest one. He reached out, grabbed it with 2 fingers, and pulled it apart. It resisted, genuinely resisted, more than silk should, and then snapped. Somewhere on the mountain, something felt that. He could hear it in the quality of the silence. "Something noticed," he said. "Yes," Tanjiro said. "Good," Inosuke said, and pulled his blades. And then the mountain began to move, the threads everywhere suddenly vibrating with the particular frequency of something that had noticed it, had guessed, and was sending out its welcome, and the 4 of them went into it together, the hat and the blades and the thunder and the beast, the box on Tanjiro's back silent now, waiting, Nezuko's eyes behind the bamboo muzzle dark and focused and very, very aware. The things that lived on the mountain felt them coming. Luffy felt the things on the mountain right back. He grinned. Put his hands in his pockets. Kept walking up. Chapter 4. The flame and the rubber. The mountain gave them Ray. Not immediately. First it gave them the threads, the controlled slayers moving through the trees like broken puppets, their bodies fighting against whatever was left of their own will with the specific horror of people who were still inside their own heads, still screaming, while their limbs went where something else directed. Tanjiro found 2 of them in the first 10 minutes. A girl no older than 16 with her own blade pressed against her throat by the threads, and a boy maybe a year older being walked mechanically toward the cliff edge. Tanjiro cut the threads. Zenitsu caught the boy before the edge got him, moving with a speed that surprised even Zenitsu, his hand closing around the boy's collar at the last moment, and yanking hard, both of them sitting in the dirt breathing. The girl with the blade collapsed when her threads cut, shaking, her sword clattering away. Inosuke had gone his own direction the moment the trees got dense enough, which was not ideal for group coordination but was so completely inevitable that no one had tried to stop him. His beast breathing was already audible somewhere up the slope, the percussive, aggressive rhythm of someone who'd located a problem and was applying direct solutions to it. Luffy moved between the threads like they weren't there. Not because they didn't affect him, they landed on his skin and tried to grip, tried to sink in, and his rubber composition gave them nothing to catch on. The threads needed tension to work, needed to find the give and pull relationship of normal biology, and Luffy's body simply didn't offer that agreement. They slid off him, the spider demon's control brushing past without purchase, and Luffy walked up the mountain at his usual pace while threads whispered past him like rain. "You're immune," Tanjiro said, catching up. "Seems like." Luffy looked at a thread trailing from his sleeve, watched it fall away. "The control thing doesn't work on me. I can still feel them, they're not invisible or anything, but they can't grab." "That's, Luffy, that means you can find the one making them." "Yes." He was already looking up the slope, calculating. The threads had a direction to them, a radial pattern, all of them traceable back to a source the way spokes trace to a wheel's center. How far up? I can't see or smell through the threads. They mask everything. I'll go first. You follow when the path clears. Together, Tanjiro said. Firm. Not a negotiation. Luffy looked at him. The iron in Tanjiro's voice was always interesting. It never came from anger, never from stubbornness in the petty sense. It came from something fundamental about how he understood the world, a refusal to let the people he'd decided on face things alone. Luffy recognized it because he had the same thing, just noisier. Together, Luffy agreed. They found Rui in a clearing halfway up the mountain where the trees had been cleared by threads, not by weather or time but very deliberately, a space created for purpose. He was sitting against a rock, small, pale, delicate-looking in the way that serious things sometimes were, the kind of beautiful that existed adjacent to wrong, a child's face on something ancient, his red eyes mild and attentive and completely without urgency. He was watching a demon wearing a woman's face perform something that had the shape of a mother's affection and none of its substance, marionette strings of silk running from Rei's fingers into her back, directing the performance with the disconnected precision of something that had seen love demonstrated but never understood the mechanism. The demon woman looked up when they entered the clearing. Rei didn't. More slayers, Rei said. His voice was soft and young and carried the particular quality of a person who'd stopped being surprised by anything a long time ago. The core is persistent. I'll grant them that. The people you've killed on this mountain, Tanjiro said. He was very controlled. His hand was on his blade but he hadn't drawn. The slayers. The civilians. Necessary, Rei said, with the same mildness. A family needs protecting. I protect mine. Luffy looked at the threads running from Rei's fingers into the demon woman's back. He looked at the performance she was running, the gestures, the sounds, calibrated and hollow. That's not a family, he said. Roy's eyes moved to him. Something shifted in them, not anger, something more like the particular focus of someone who'd identified an anomaly. You're not a slayer, Rei said. No. You have no blade. No breathing style I can identify. He tilted his head by a fraction. And the threads don't take. Nope. Interesting. He looked at Luffy with something that might have been curiosity if it hadn't been sitting inside eyes that had stopped caring about most things. What are you? Nobody you want to make an enemy of, Luffy said pleasantly. Everyone says that. I'm sure. He looked at the threads. But here's the thing about families, Rei. You can't make them with strings. You can't force it. It doesn't work that way. Something happened in Rei's face. Fast, and then gone. Something young and raw and furious appeared for a half second and then the mildness came back down over it like a curtain. You know nothing about. I know what a family feels like, Luffy said. Mine is somewhere out there right now looking for me. Every one of them. Not because I'm making them. Because they want to. His voice was level. Not lecturing. Not angry. Just certain, the way only true things are certain. What you've built here is sadder than being alone. The threads went taut. All of them, across the entire mountain, the radial pattern pulling in like a breath before a shout. The demon woman launched herself at Tanjiro, full speed, her controlled body moving with the desperate efficiency of something that couldn't choose its own direction but could still choose its velocity. Tanjiro moved. Water-breathing, fourth form, the flowing redirect, meeting her momentum and sending it sideways without meeting it head-on, the cut precise and the motion water-clean. The threads that had been running her snapped as her head separated, and in the last moment before the demon woman dissolved, her face changed, the performance dropped away, and underneath it was something exhausted and relieved, and she went quietly. Rei stood. He stood in one fluid motion, no effort visible, and when he moved it was with the speed of an upper moon, not comparable to lower demons, not the kind of fast you adjusted for. The kind of fast that simply arrived at where it was going before your perception had registered the departure. Luffy stepped between him and Tanjiro. The thread hit him across the chest and left a mark, not the control mark, but a physical impact mark, the silk hardened to something that could cut, and it did cut a red line across Luffy's chest that he looked down at with mild interest. "That one works differently," he said. "The cutting threads," Ray said, "are not for control." His voice hadn't changed. Still mild. "They're for slicing. I've cut Hashira-level slayers with them." He flicked his hand and 4 more came, fast and crisscrossing, the pattern designed to leave no angle of approach. Luffy expanded. Not consciously named, not announced, he simply let his body do what it did when it needed more surface to work with, and the threads hit a torso that had spread its absorption across a wider area. The cutting impact distributed across more rubber than any thread could maintain tension against. He compressed back. "Huh," Ray said. Then Luffy moved. He didn't come straight. He came at an angle, then another, then bounced off a tree, the non-linear approach pattern making the predictive thread placement Ray was used to suddenly wrong. Threads landed where Luffy had been, not where he was, and Luffy was somewhere else entirely, moving too fast and too erratically for the silk geometry to solve him. He got his hands on Ray. He felt the power in him, genuinely enormous, the accumulated strength of an upper moon, a creature that existed at a completely different level from every demon they'd encountered so far. The threads immediately wrapped around his arms, cutting, the hardened silk trying to separate his hands from his wrists. His hands stayed on rubber. The silk could cut normal tissue but found nothing to bite in elastic material, the blade quality of it requiring tension to work and Luffy's body giving it the same cooperative friction as trying to cut running water. Ray stared at his own threads. For the first time in the clearing, something crossed his face that was not mild. Luffy drove his forehead into Ray's face. Not a technique. Not a form. Just the bluntest possible application of mass and velocity. And Ray went back. Actually went back, the impact sending him 5 feet across the clearing, the first time in this fight that gravity had had an opinion about him. He caught himself. He stood. And something in him had changed. The mildness gone now, not replaced by anger but by something more dangerous than anger. The focused clarity of something that had just been made to take a fight seriously. The threads multiplied. Hundreds of them. The clearing filled with silk, the cutting variant and the thicker binding variant both, a 3-dimensional web that turned the entire space into a geometry problem, every point of approach cross-covered by something that would cut or hold. Luffy looked at it. Tanjiro, from the edge of the clearing, felt the killing intent radiating off the web and took half a step back. He'd been reading the fight with the focused intelligence of someone who understood that his role right now was witness and support, that his strength wasn't at the level this required and trying to pretend otherwise would only create problems. He was breathing, keeping his focus, watching for an opening that was actually an opening. Luffy took a breath. Not the water-breathing pattern. His own thing. The gathering. And then he went through the web. Not around it. Through, hitting the first layer and letting the threads compress him, flowing through the geometry the way water found paths through rock, his rubber body passing through the intersections of cutting silk by not providing the tension the silk needed to function, and the web which would have been a death sentence for anything with normal biology became, for Luffy, a complicated obstacle course that he moved through at speed. He came out the other side directly in front of Ray, and he was already in the motion. The focused strike. The concentrated edge. The neck. But Ray was not the drum demon. Ray was not any demon he'd fought before. Ray moved, genuinely moved, a last fraction dodge that wasn't enough to avoid the hit entirely but was enough to make it not the hit it was supposed to be. The impact landed on his shoulder, not his neck, and the force that would have ended it sent him sideways instead, crashing through his own web, threads snapping around him. He skidded across the ground. He looked up. He was bleeding. He stared at his own blood with the expression of someone who hadn't seen it in a very long time. "You can't hurt me," he said. "Yes," Luffy said. "But you can't kill me." He stood. The shoulder was already healing, fast, upper moon fast, the tissue knitting visibly. Not without a blade. Not without breathing. He wasn't saying it as a taunt. He was saying it as a fact, assessing the situation with the clinical precision of something that had survived a very long time by being accurate about odds. Luffy looked at the healed shoulder. He looked at Rui. He looked, very briefly, at Tanjiro. Something moved between them. Not a word. Not a gesture. Something that had been built across months of training and demon mountains and mountains before that. Two people who'd learned each other well enough that the understanding didn't need language. Tanjiro breathed. Total concentration. Full. Every technique Urokodaki had given him, brought to bear all at once, the water pattern becoming more than a pattern, becoming a current, becoming the river Urokodaki had told him to listen to, and Tanjiro heard it now the way he'd heard it the first time by the river, complete and total, the oxygen bright in his blood, his vision sharp, the world slowing to a pace he could read. He moved. Water breathing. 10th form, the one Urokodaki had called the pinnacle, the one Tanjiro had only managed twice in training and both times barely. The form that called everything together into a single motion, a single current, the kind of cut that didn't come from the arm, or the shoulder or the technique but from somewhere deeper, somewhere that had Tanjiro's father in it, and his mother, and everyone who'd been in that house, and the particular iron fact that he was still here, still moving, still fighting for the small girl in the box who was still trying to become human again. The blade caught the moonlight. Rui's threads came up to intercept, automatically, reflexively, his defense activating faster than thought. Luffy's hands closed around the threads from behind and pulled. He pulled with everything, both arms, gear second, the accelerated output creating enough countertension that the threads, for just a moment, were occupied with him rather than Tanjiro's blade. Just a moment. Half a second. Enough. Tanjiro's blade found the neck. The silence afterward was enormous. Rui's head separated cleanly, and in the seconds of dissolution that followed, his face went through the same journey Tanjiro had watched every demon's face go through, the layers of what they'd become peeling back to show what had been underneath. What was underneath Rui was a child. An actual child, a human child with a human face and human eyes, and in the seconds before the dissolution took him completely his expression was something Tanjiro couldn't look away from and couldn't look at. It was relief. "I want it," he started. He didn't finish. The clearing went quiet. The threads went slack all over the mountain. The controlled slayers above and below felt the sudden release of their strings and collapsed into themselves, breathing, alive. Tanjiro stood with his blade still out, and his whole body shaking from the output of the 10th form, which he had not known his body could sustain, and was now discovering cost exactly what it cost. Luffy had thread marks across both arms, red lines that were already fading because rubber healed faster than skin, and he was breathing in the deliberate way that meant he was managing something. They looked at each other. "That was close," Tanjiro said. "Yeah," Luffy agreed. "Your arms." "Fine. Yours?" Shaking. He looked at his blade. "The 10th form takes a lot. You can do it again." "I don't know if you can," Luffy said. "You did it once. That means it's in you. The next time will be easier." He said it not as encouragement, as a practical observation, the way you'd say you can run this distance because you just ran this distance. Tanjiro looked at him for a moment. Then he sheathed his blade. "Luffy," he said. "If I'd been alone, you weren't," Luffy said. Simple. Final. Not an argument, just a fact, and Tanjiro accepted it the way you accepted facts. They went to find Inosuke, who they located by sound, the sound of someone being loudly and aggressively fine while lying in a pile of spider silk that had nearly killed him, his beast's breathing technique having managed to out-accelerate the threads by the margin of someone who'd refused to die on principle. Zenitsu they found further down the slope, asleep, surrounded by demon spiders that had been killed with the specific speed and precision of thunder-breathing's single devastating form. Zenitsu himself propped against a tree, unconscious, his face peaceful in a way it never quite managed when he was awake. "He did all this," Tanjiro said softly. "While asleep," Luffy confirmed. They looked at the evidence of the sleeping thunder, the precision of the kills, the lack of wasted motion, the absolute economy of a single form executed perfectly, again and again, an unconscious boy who was better at being himself when he stopped trying. Inosuke made a sound of deep personal conflict and looked away. The flame Hashira arrived as they were getting Zenitsu to his feet. He arrived the way fire arrived, without preamble, suddenly and completely, the presence of him preceding his actual appearance by several seconds, the mountain seeming to acknowledge him before he stepped into view. He was big, not Luffy stocky but tall, broad, with gold and red hair that went in every direction and had clearly never negotiated with gravity, and his haori was the flame pattern that made the whole image complete. He stood at the edge of the tree line and looked at the scene on the slope, the dissolved demon evidence, the freed Slayer Corps members beginning to move, Inosuke already posturing at him, Zenitsu regaining consciousness with the sound of distress, Tanjiro still catching his breath, Nezuko's box visible on Tanjiro's back. And Luffy, standing in the middle of it, red thread marks on both arms, hat intact, who looked up at the flame Hashira with the same direct, unhurried attention he gave to everything. Rengoku Kaijuro met his eyes. Something happened in the Hashira's face that was not the standard reaction to meeting a stranger, something that was closer to recognition, though they never met, the specific quality of one fire recognizing another. "Magnificent!" Rengoku said. His voice had only one volume setting. Several freed slayers flinched. Inosuke, who did not flinch at volume, pointed both blades. "The boy with no sword," Rengoku continued, moving down the slope with enormous strides, radiating warmth like the actual element his haori depicted. "And the water boy and the—" He looked at the spider kill evidence around Zenitsu. "Thunder? The uniform suggests thunder." He looked at Inosuke. "Beast. Unusual choice. I appreciate it." He stopped in front of Luffy. Looked at him from much closer range. "Who are you?" "Luffy." He looked up at Rengoku without intimidation or performance. Just looked, the same way he looked at Rei, direct, genuinely curious, assessing. "You're a Hashira. Flame Hashira. Rengoku Kaijuro." He said his own name the way it was the opening line of a story. "You fought on this mountain tonight?" "Yes." "You fought Rei?" "With Tanjiro." "Together." Rengoku looked at Tanjiro. At the healing thread marks on Tanjiro's arms. At the particular quality of someone who'd performed a 10th form and survived it. He looked back at Luffy. "You have no breathing style," he said. "No." "You have no blade." "No." "And yet you fought an upper moon." He said it with the tone of someone cataloging something extraordinary without yet knowing what category to put it in. "I help," Luffy said. "Tanjiro killed him." Rengoku turned to Tanjiro and bowed, not deeply, but genuinely, the specific respect of a master for someone who'd done something that deserved it. "Water breathing. 10th form. At your rank." He straightened. "Your master is Urokodaki." "Yes," Tanjiro said, startled. "I knew him. A long time ago." Something moved through Rengoku's expression, old and complicated and dealt with, the way things are when you've had years to arrange them. "He trained you well." He looked at the box. "And the demon?" "My sister," Tanjiro said, iron tone. Rengoku looked at the box for a long moment. Nezuko was visible through the gaps, her pink eyes watching the flame Hashira with the animal alertness of something assessing a potential threat. He looked at Tanjiro. At the certainty in Tanjiro's face. Then at Luffy, who was watching Rengoku with the specific attention of someone deciding whether they needed to do something. "I should take her," Rengoku said. "Not a threat, a statement of the Corps' protocol. The rules are clear about, she's protected," Luffy said. Rengoku's eyes moved to him. Luffy said it the way you'd say the sky is blue or water is wet, not as a challenge, not as aggression, just as information. "This is a fact. Proceed accordingly." Rengoku looked at him for 3 full seconds. The mountain was very quiet. Inosuke's blades were still up. Zenitsu had gone very still. Tanjiro stood between the box and the world with his hand on his blade and his eyes on Rengoku. Then Rengoku laughed. It was an enormous laugh, a full-body commitment to the act, the kind of laugh that sounded like something genuinely releasing. He laughed for 3 seconds and then stopped and looked at Luffy with bright eyes. "I like you," he said. "Just like that. Clean and immediate." "You seem okay," Luffy said, which coming from him was basically equivalent. "There is a train," Rengoku said, shifting direction with the ease of someone who'd decided something and moved on. "The Mugen train. Reports of disappearances, 40 people in 2 months. I am to investigate." He looked at the 4 of them. At the carnage of the mountain. At the evidence of what they'd done. "Come! On a train?" Zenitsu said, with the specific hope of someone for whom the promise of an enclosed, structured space sounded like safety. "Yes. We're coming," Luffy said. "I didn't invite." Zenitsu caught himself. "We're coming." "Yes. Absolutely. Trains are wonderful." The Mugen train was everything its name promised. It sat in the station breathing steam, enormous and dark and purposeful, its body carrying the weight of 40 missing people somewhere in its architecture. The platform around it was ordinary, travelers with ordinary bags, station workers in ordinary uniforms, the mundane world going about its business besides something that had stopped being safe in ways the mundane world hadn't been told about yet. Rengoku was already on board when they arrived, visible through a window, eating. He was eating with the same all-in commitment he brought to everything else, a row of bento boxes lined up in front of him that he was working through systematically. "You may I?" they heard through the glass. "He does that?" Zenitsu asked. "Every time," Luffy said, who had known Rengoku for approximately 4 hours and had already correctly identified this as a constant. They boarded. Found seats in the same car as Rengoku. Luffy sat beside him because sitting beside someone who ate with that level of commitment was, to Luffy, just correct behavior. Inosuke sat on top of the luggage rack because no one stopped him. Tanjiro settled the box in the space between his seat and the window. Zenitsu occupied a window seat and watched the platform with the expression of someone committing the ordinary world to memory. The train began to move. For a while, it was just a train. The darkness outside, the rhythm of the wheels, the ordinary sounds of passengers settling for a night journey. Rengoku ate through 4 bentos and began telling Luffy, unprompted, about the flame-breathing style, its history, its forms, the pillars of its philosophy. He explained these things with the warmth of someone who genuinely loved them, not performing the love but actually feeling it, the way Tanjiro talked about his family. "My father was a flame Hashira before me," Rengoku said, and for a moment the warmth dimmed slightly, the way a fire dims when a draft hits it. Then it came back. "He stopped training when I was young. The things he loved, he stopped loving. I chose differently." He looked at Luffy. "What do you love?" "My crew," Luffy said immediately. "The sea. Meat. A beat. Mostly my crew." "What would you do for them?" "Anything." Rengoku looked at him. Anything is a strong word. Most people say it and mean most things. "I mean anything," Luffy said. It wasn't a boast. It sat there the way true things sat, without decoration, without the performance of weight. Rengoku read it accurately and his eyes brightened. "Yes," he said. "I believe you would." He looked out the window at the rushing dark. That kind of love is a form of power. The strongest kind, some would say. My mother said it. He was quiet for a moment. She died when I was young. But the things she said stayed in me like fire stays in wood. Long after the flame. He looked back at Luffy. "Where is your crew?" "Don't know exactly," Luffy said. "Different world, I think. They'll find me or I'll find them. That's how it works." "You're certain?" "Completely." Rengoku looked at him for a moment with an expression that had nothing analytical in it, just one person looking at another and recognizing something in them that matched something in themselves. "Set your heart ablaze," Rengoku said quietly. Like something he told himself many times. "That's what my mother said. Whatever you do, wherever you are, set it ablaze." Luffy thought about it. Mine is always on fire, he said. Rengoku grinned, wide and absolute, and completely lit, the expression of someone who'd found what he was looking for. Yes. I can see that. The train lurched. Not the normal lurch of speed or track variation. A lurch with intention in it, the specific quality of movement that meant something had changed on the train that wasn't about the wheels. Everyone asleep at once. Not all passengers, not everyone. The ones who'd been awake a moment ago simply weren't anymore, heads falling, breathing deepening, the specific collapse of people pulled under by something external. A murmur moved through the car as the remaining waking passengers looked around with the uncertain alarm of people who didn't know what they were looking at. Rengoku's hand went to his blade. Luffy felt it, not sleepiness, nothing like sleep, but the presence of something trying to put him under and finding the architecture of his mind a different shape than it expected. Like threads that needed tension. Like silk against rubber. He looked at the sleeping passengers. He looked at the floor. He could see, if he looked at the right angle, threads, different from rays, finer, running through the walls and under the seats and into the bodies of the sleeping people, thin as spider silk and barely visible. A demon's already on the train, he said. Yes, Rengoku said. His eyes were open, his hands steady. He looked at Luffy. You're awake. The sleeping thing doesn't work on me. Good. He looked around the car, assessing. The threads are in the walls. The demon is controlling the space the way, same as the drum house, Luffy said. Different style. More personal. He could feel the threads trying to find him, seeking purchase in his sleeping mind that simply wasn't shaped right for them. It's trying to put me in a dream. Can it? Luffy thought about this for exactly 1 second. It can try, he said. Then let it, Rengoku said, and there was something sharp in his eyes that was tactical, not reckless. If you can enter the dream, you can find where the demon is working from. The threads go inward, from here, into whatever space the dream occupies. Follow them back. And you? I will deal with the train. He stood, hand on his blade, the flame Hiyori settling around him. The demon will have a physical body somewhere on or in this train. If you find it from the inside, tell me. He said this as though Luffy would obviously be able to tell him things across the dream barrier, which was not a given, but said with such calm certainty that questioning it felt premature. Luffy looked at the threads. Let himself stop resisting them. Let the dream space pull find him. He went under. The dream tried to be convincing. It gave him sea and the sunny and the sound of his crew, Zoro's voice from somewhere below deck, Nami shouting numbers at the horizon, the smell of Sanji's cooking through the kitchen hatch. He stood on the deck and felt it. Felt everything wrong about it. The light was slightly too perfect. The sounds were slightly too complete, lacking the random underscore of actual life. No creak of wood that wasn't load-bearing, no gull cry that wasn't timed right. The dream was built by something that knew what happiness looked like from the outside and had reconstructed it without the understanding of why it worked. Luffy looked at the dream sunny. Then looked through it, at the threads running underneath, visible here in the dream space as lines of dark silk going in every direction, the architecture of the demon's control spreading out from a center point like roots under soil. He followed the roots. He walked through the dream the way he walked through anything, directly, without worrying about what was in the way, and the dream moved around him because he was not operating by its rules. He followed the threads to their source, and the source was a small, thin boy with hollow eyes and a smile that had never been attached to anything real. Enmu. He looked at Luffy with those hollow eyes, sitting at the center of the thread web with his wrists crossed in his lap, and something flickered through his expression. You're awake, he said. Yes, Luffy said. You're not supposed to be awake. I know. Your dreams are. He tried clearly. Luffy could see the architecture of the attempt, the sunny, the crew, the sea, all of it accurate, the information gathered from somewhere deep in Luffy's sleeping adjacent mind and reconstructed. You have very clear dreams. Very specific. Most people's dreams are vague, assembled from feeling and impression. Yours are people. He said it with the curiosity of someone who'd built thousands of dream prisons and never encountered this particular model before. Every single one is a person. You dream in people. Yes, Luffy said. He was looking at the thread web. Calculating. It made the reconstruction easy, in a way. Enmu continued. I know exactly who your crew is. What they look like. What they sound like. A pause. I could keep you here. Trap you in the happiness of it. Most people, when I find what they want most, they stop fighting. They choose the dream over the pain of waking. Luffy looked at him. I don't, he said. No, Enmu said. You don't. Something moved behind his hollow eyes, not quite sadness, the ghost of a shape that sadness had once occupied. You know it's not real. You've known since the moment you arrived. And you stayed in it anyway, looking for me, because you need to know where I am. He smiled, the smile without attachment. The real crew is out there somewhere. And you know it. So the dream is nothing. Luffy said. It's nothing. The real thing is real. This is just a picture of it. He reached out and grabbed a thread. He pulled. The dream broke. He came back to the train car with the specific violence of someone forcing a door, the consciousness snapping back into his body, and he was already moving before he was fully awake, off his seat and through the car toward the roof access, because the thread network's center point had been above him, above the train, on the roof. He went through the car ceiling. Not through the hatch. Through the ceiling. Straight up, fist first, the metal parting with a sound like a very emphatic decision, and he came out onto the roof of the moving train in the rushing dark air. Enmu was there. His physical form, attached to the train itself now, threads running from his body into the train's infrastructure, having merged with it, the demon and the train becoming one system. It was not a small commitment. It was the commitment of someone who'd decided to win by becoming the battleground. Luffy looked at the train demon. Enmu looked at Luffy. You found me, Enmu said. I told you, Luffy said. It doesn't work on me. He moved. The fight on the roof of the Mugen train was not elegant. The train was moving, fast, the wind enormous, the ground below not visible in the dark, the architecture of the roof offering almost no stable footing. Enmu had merged himself with the train's physical body, which meant his weak points were distributed across a much larger surface and his ability to generate threads was everywhere at once. But Luffy had found his center on the roof of ships in Grand Line storms. Moving ground was not new information. He found the connection points, where Enmu's body merged with the train, the thin concentrated stems where the physical demon met the mechanical train, and he broke them. One by one, hunting them across the roof at speed, pulling threads and snapping connection points and getting hit by everything Enmu could generate and absorbing it, rubber and will and the very specific stubborn anger of someone who'd been shown a picture of his crew and asked to choose it over reality. The final connection point was at the front of the train, at the engine, where Enmu had concentrated the last of his physical self. Luffy came over the roof of the final car at speed and hit Enmu's concentrated form at the front with everything behind it. The neck. The focus strike. The full accelerated output. The head separated cleanly, and the threads dissolved, and across the entire train the sleeping passengers began to stir and wake, the dream architecture collapsing gracefully, and below Luffy the train began to slow, freed from whatever Enmu had been doing to its throttle. He stood at the front of the train in the rush of air, looking out at the dark ahead, the world going past at speed, and breathing. He was back in the car when Rengoku appeared. The flame Hashira looked at the hole Luffy had made in the ceiling. At the collapsed sleeping passengers now waking. At Luffy, sitting in his seat, holding his hat on against the air coming through the roof. Done? Rengoku said. Done, Luffy said. Rengoku looked at him for a moment. Then he sat down heavily, the post-battle weight of someone who'd been managing the rest of the train's problems, passengers, panicking staff, the secondary demons that Enmu had placed as insurance, and exhaled. You went through the ceiling, he said. The hatch was further. I see. He was quiet for a moment. Did you see the dream? The one it put you in? Yes. Your crew? Yes. Rengoku looked at him. It must have been very convincing. It was accurate, Luffy said. That's different. He looked out the window at the dark. Accurate isn't the same as real. Real is warm. Real has weight. Real talks back in ways you didn't expect. He thought about Zoro saying something contrary at the worst moment. About Nami's hand on his shoulder when she thought he was asleep. About the way Usopp laughed. The dream was a painting. Really good painting. But I know the difference. Rengoku listened to this with the full attention he gave everything. Then he said, I dream of my mother sometimes. The dream is very accurate. Is it real? No, he said. But it's warm enough. He straightened. She was warm enough that even a copy carries some of it. They sat in silence for a while. The train slowed to a stop at the next station. The sleeping passengers gradually organized themselves back into waking people with the dazed, slightly confused quality of people who'd had a very odd night and weren't quite sure how to report it. Inosuke came down from the luggage rack. Zenitsu had slept through most of it, actual sleep this time, genuine exhaustion, and his face was peaceful against the window. Tanjiro sat across from Luffy with the box between them and looked at his friend. You okay? He asked. Yeah. Luffy pulled his hat down. It showed me the sunny. My crew. Tanjiro was quiet. It wasn't them, Luffy said. They're real and they're out there and that wasn't them. He looked at the hat. But I thought about them. Really thought about them, for the first time in a while. All of them. He looked up. I miss them. This was simple and true and said without performance. Tanjiro received it the same way. They're waiting for you, he said. Yeah. Then they'll still be waiting when this is over. Luffy looked at him. At the boy with the iron heart and the water style and the sister in the box, who'd walked up a demon-infested mountain for love and kept walking because stopping wasn't something he'd learned. Who had become, without either of them marking the specific moment, someone that Luffy would put in the category with his crew. Yeah, he said. They will. The train sat in the station. Dawn was beginning, the first pale edge of it visible above the mountain line. Rengoku stood. And then Akaza arrived. He came from the dark beyond the station lights, and the night itself seemed to understand what he was and adjust accordingly, the shadows sharpening, the air going dense. He was not like Rui. He was not like Enmu. He was something that existed at a different altitude entirely, upper 3, and it was visible in the way he stood, the way the air around him behaved, the way Rengoku's hand went to his blade and stayed there. He looked at Rengoku with the eyes of someone who'd found what he was looking for. Flame Hashira, he said. I've been looking for someone worthy. I'm here, Rengoku said simply. Akaza looked at Luffy. The look lasted exactly 3 seconds. Assessment, cataloging, conclusion. You're not a slayer, he said. No, Luffy said. Then stay out of this. Not arrogant. Practical. The way you'd ask a civilian to step back from a car accident. No, Luffy said. Akaza's eyes moved back to Rengoku. Your allies are brave. They are, Rengoku said. But this fight, he said it quietly, directed toward Luffy, with the tone of someone making a specific request rather than issuing a command. This one is mine to begin. Let me start it. Luffy looked at him. At the Flame Hashira who'd eaten 8 bentos on a moving train and told him to set his heart ablaze and talked about his mother with a face like a fire in Goodwood. I'll be right here, Luffy said. Rengoku met his eyes. And then he smiled, not the enormous performative grin, something quieter, the thing underneath the performance, warm and real and the specific expression of someone who knew exactly what they were about to do and had made peace with every part of it. He turned to face Akaza. The flame Haori spread. The night opened up around them, and the fight began, and Luffy stood where he'd said he would stand, right there, watching, ready, the weight of what this was landing on him with full gravity. Right there. Chapter 5. What joy looks like to a god. The fight between Rengoku and Akaza was the most beautiful and terrible thing Luffy had ever watched. He'd watched Mihawk move. He'd watched Whitebird fight. He'd stood on battlefields where the ground changed shape and the sky changed color, and the sea itself picked sides. He knew what power at the upper limit of human potential looked like when it was moving at full speed, and he'd felt it in his bones the same way you felt certain kinds of music, not through the ears but through the chest, a resonance that bypassed processing and went straight to something older. This was that. But different. Because Rengoku was going to die. Luffy understood this before the first exchange was halfway finished. Not because Akaza was simply stronger, though he was, the upper three's physical output at a level that bent the word human into something approximate, but because of the fundamental arithmetic of the situation. Rengoku's flame breathing was operating at absolute maximum, the forms flowing one into the next without break or hesitation, each one a complete expression of everything Urokodaki had meant when he talked about the pinnacle of a style. The fire in Rengoku was real and total and burning at the highest temperature it could reach. And Akaza was regenerating everything. Every hit. Every cut. The flame Hashira's blade went in, and the wound came back and went in again, and the wound came back, and the arithmetic was cruel and simple. You could not win a war of attrition against something that healed faster than you could damage it. Not without a specific answer to the regeneration. Not without something that changed the fundamental terms. Luffy watched this with the still, total attention of someone calculating. Tanjiro watched it with his fists at his sides and the specific grief of someone watching something they couldn't stop. Zenitsu had stopped breathing. Inosuke was watching with his head tilted at an angle that, for Inosuke, indicated deep and genuine processing rather than the surface-level combat assessment he usually ran. The fight moved, across the station platform, through a support pillar that simply ceased to be a pillar when they passed through it, across the ground that cracked and buckled under the force of exchanges either combatant was pulling, because either combatant knew how to pull. Rengoku took a hit that would have killed 10 men. He stayed upright by the specific refusal of someone who decided the word fall didn't apply tonight. He took another. He kept moving. Luffy moved. Not into the fight, not to take Rengoku's place, not to interrupt the specific thing Rengoku had committed to. He moved to the edge of the exchange's radius, close enough to matter, where he could see the pattern of Akaza's movements at near range. Where he could feel the pressure waves of the blood demon art techniques and map them. Akaza noticed him there. His eyes flicked to Luffy between exchanges, brief, returning, the way a predator's attention moved between a primary threat and a secondary one it had decided to deprioritize. Not dismissal. Delay. "You're watching," Akaza said between forms. He wasn't winded. He'd never been winded. "Yes," Luffy said. "Learning something?" "Yes." Akaza looked at him for a full second, during which Rengoku's blade took him across the shoulder and healed before the second arrived. "What are you learning?" "Where you come from," Luffy said. "When you attack. You always angle from the same quarter when you think you have a clean hit. Same quarter every time." Something very quiet happened in Akaza's expression. "You're right," he said, with the tone of someone genuinely surprised by this. "No one has ever said that to me. No one's ever watched you this carefully," Luffy said. "And what will you do with this knowledge?" "I don't know yet." Akaza looked at him for another half-second. "You're honest," he said. Then he turned back to Rengoku and the fight resumed, faster now, the upper three moving with the extra edge of someone who'd been reminded that the field contained variables. Rengoku took a fist through his side. The sound of it was final, the specific wet percussion of damage that had gone somewhere vital. He stayed upright. He drove his blade through Akaza's neck at the same moment, and Akaza's head tilted on the nearly severed connection, and for 3 seconds there was a tableau, the flame Hashira with a fist through his torso and Akaza with a blade through his throat, both of them still, the pre-dawn light just beginning to arrive at the edges of the sky. Then Akaza pulled back. The blade came free. The neck healed. Rengoku stood. The fist left a hole behind it. He stood anyway. Luffy was moving. He came from Akaza's quarter, the one he'd identified, the angle Akaza always came from, which meant Akaza would never think to check it because you didn't check your own blind spot. The spot was blind precisely because it didn't register as threat space. He came fast and he came focused, the accelerated output, and his hands found Akaza's arms, both of them, gripping at the elbows, the rubber hands getting the grip that silk couldn't find because rubber cooperated with pressure while flesh resisted it. He pulled. Not to throw. Not to slam. He pulled both arms back and apart, the specific motion that opened a person's center line, the posture that everything defensive in human anatomy was designed to prevent, and held. Akaza looked down at his held arms with the expression of someone encountering a physical reality they hadn't previously included in their model. No, Luffy said. Rengoku was already moving. His body should not have been able to move. By every physical law that applied to a human being with that injury, he should have been on the ground. He moved anyway, the flame breathing coming from somewhere below the physical, somewhere in the part of him his mother had lit, and that had been burning since, and the ninth form came out of him clean and total and absolutely everything. The blade found Akaza's neck. It found it properly, correctly, with a Hashira's full output behind it, the fire in the blade bright and real. And Akaza moved. Not enough to escape, not quite, but enough. He threw himself back, taking Luffy with him for 1 second before Luffy's grip was broken by the force of it, and the blade cut deep and true but not clean, and the regeneration started, and Akaza landed 12 feet away with his neck already closing. He looked at Rengoku. He looked at Luffy. Something had happened in his face that Luffy hadn't seen there before. Extraordinary, Akaza said. Not the word you expected from something in the middle of a fight. He said it with the quality of someone who'd just experienced something genuinely rare and was being accurate about it. The two of you together, he continued, looking between them, came closer than anything has in 300 years. Rengoku said nothing. He was managing his breathing, which cost him something visible. He was still upright. His blade was up. Come with me, Akaza said. Not to both of them. To Rengoku. Become a demon. What you have, what you've shown tonight, it deserves to survive. It deserves more time than a human body gives it. No, Rengoku said. Not angry. Not defiant. Just the same simple, total certainty Luffy used when the answer was obvious. The answer is no. It will always be no. You'll die, Akaza said. I'll die, Rengoku confirmed. That's fine. Akaza stared at him. And for the first time in the entire fight, something in the upper three's face looked unresolved, the way a perfect equation looks when someone has introduced a term it can't account for. The sun came. Not gradually. The pre-dawn had been building for minutes, and then the sun arrived at the horizon with the sudden finality of things that have been happening slowly, and then all at once, and the light hit the station and hit Akaza, and he felt it the way all demons felt it, the immediate, visceral, bone-deep wrongness of sunlight. He looked at the light. He looked at Rengoku. He looked at Luffy. Then he turned and went into the shadows, not fast the way he'd moved all night but controlled, the specific retreat of something choosing to leave rather than being driven away, which preserved a distinction Luffy suspected was important to him. The station was quiet. The light was gold and full and completely indifferent to what the night had cost. Rengoku lowered his blade. Luffy was beside him in the next moment, not dramatically, not making noise about it, just present, the way he was present for things that mattered. He put a hand on Rengoku's arm. Not to hold him up, Rengoku was holding himself up. Just to be there. We got close, Rengoku said. His voice had changed, not weaker, but different, the way a voice changed when the body it lived in was managing something serious. Almost, Luffy said. Almost is not failure. He looked at the horizon. Almost means it's possible. That someone will. He turned to look at Luffy, and his eyes were the same, bright, certain, the warmth entirely undimmed by the night or the wound or the arithmetic that was running its conclusion. You held him. You found the angle. You made the cut. Together. He smiled. Your word. Tanjiro was there now, both hands pressed against the wound with the desperate focus of someone who'd learned enough basic medicine to know when it mattered and know that it very much mattered right now. Tears were running down his face without apparent connection to anything his expression was doing, the grief moving independently, his face maintaining its focus while the water had its own schedule. Rengoku-san, Tanjiro said. Don't cry. Rengoku said gently. A flame Hashira is not wept for. He is remembered. He looked at the four of them, Tanjiro, Luffy, Zenitsu and Inosuke who'd come from the platform's edge, all of them gathered in the gold morning light. All of you. You're extraordinary. He looked at Luffy last. Set it ablaze, he said. Whatever you carry. Wherever you go. I know, Luffy said. I know you know. The smile again. I said it anyway. He died the way he'd done everything, fully, without reservation, with his face toward the sunrise and the warmth of him going out slow and complete like a fire that had burned through all its available fuel and left good heat behind in the ground. Luffy sat beside him for a while. Nobody said anything. Inosuke, who did not cry and had no frame for grief that wasn't physical, sat cross-legged in the dirt and stared at the ground and was very still. Zenitsu's face was completely wet. Tanjiro sat with his hands in his lap and his eyes on Rengoku's face, and the tears ran their course. After a while, Luffy stood. He looked at the direction Akaza had gone. He looked at it with the specific quality of a thing being committed to memory in a particular way, not grief, not rage, but the quiet noting of an account that was not closed. He put his hat on properly. Settled it. Come on, he said. We're not done. They weren't done. The crow told Tanjiro 3 days later, a new mission, different location, the entertainment district. Reports of a demon operating in the pleasure quarters of the city, disappearances measured in months, the kind of careful predation that spoke of intelligence and patience rather than hunger. A Hashira had been assigned. Sound Hashira. Yuzui Tengen. Luffy found this out by listening to the crow, which had decided he was part of the operational picture whether the Corps officially agreed or not. Yuzui Tengen was, Luffy thought when he met him, exactly what would happen if someone decided that being a former shinobi was insufficient and had added extremely loud as a personal development goal. He was enormous, genuinely large, with white hair and jewels and the specific bearing of someone who decided the world was a stage, and he was both the lead and the set designer. He'd already recruited Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke into a scheme involving disguises and infiltration of the entertainment district, which had required explaining to Inosuke what an entertainment district was, which had taken longer than anticipated. He looked at Luffy with the evaluative eyes of someone used to measuring people. You're the one who held an upper 3, he said. For a moment, Luffy said. That's a moment more than most people get. He looked Luffy over, the hat, the lack of sword, the rubber quality of him that registered as wrong at close range. You can't go undercover. You look wrong. I know. You'll draw attention. Probably. So what's your function in this operation? He said operation the way people who'd been operatives said it, automatic and habitual. I follow Tanjiro, Luffy said. When it gets bad. Yuzui looked at him for a moment. When it gets bad, he repeated. Not before. Infiltration is their thing. He meant Tanjiro, Zenitsu, Inosuke. I'm not subtle enough for it. I know that. But when the demon surfaces, you want to be there. Yes. Yuzui was quiet for a beat. Then he pointed a jeweled finger at Luffy. You'll stay in the outer district. You'll listen for the signal. I'll make noise when it's time, trust me, you'll hear it, and then you move. Yes, Luffy said. Flamboyantly? Luffy grinned. Probably. Yuzui matched it, the grin enormous and fully committed. I like you, he said, with the same immediate directness Rengoku had used. You're not subtle and you know it. Most people either pretend to be subtle or don't know they're not. You're just. He made a gesture that encompassed Luffy's entire situation. You. Yeah, Luffy said. The entertainment district was alive in a way that most places weren't, alive with noise and color, and the specific energy of a place built to make people forget the time. Lanterns everywhere, the smell of food and perfume and charcoal fires, music from behind paper screens, the sound of laughter that was working hard to be genuine, and sometimes made it. Luffy walked through it with his hands in his pockets, and his hat tipped down against the lantern light, and felt the wrongness underneath the life of it. It was there. He wasn't sure how he felt it. Some combination of the physical tells his body had learned to read, the temperature of the air in certain alleys, the quality of silence in spaces that should have been noisy, the way certain lanterns' light behaved around the edges. Something that didn't want to be seen was very present in this district, and had learned the landscape so well that its not wanting to be seen had become almost ambient. He walked. He listened. He ate. There was a stall selling skewered things, and he cleared it out sufficiently that the vendor watched him with the specific expression of someone revising their business model in real time. Hours passed. The district's energy shifted as the night deepened, the loud frivolity of the earlier hours replaced by something more real and more tired, the workers moving through their routines with the practiced efficiency of people who'd made an uneasy peace with what their life was. Then the buildings started exploding. Not gradually. Not in sequence. A section of the district's upper quarters simply detonated, not with fire but with sound, Yuzui's sound breathing expanding outward in a concussive ring that brought walls down and sent the carefully constructed nothing to see here of the demon's operation crashing into visibility. Luffy was already running. He went up the nearest building, straight up the wall, his rubber legs absorbing the angle, the surface not matching, and came over the rooftop into the upper district where Yuzui was fighting something that moved in two bodies and coordinated them with a frightening precision, the demon husband and demon wife of what Yuzui had called Daki and Jotaro, an upper six split across two forms. He saw Tanjiro in the street below, injured but upright, his breathing controlled. He saw Inosuke on a different rooftop with the twin blades moving at something he couldn't fully see. He saw Zenitsu, actually saw him moving, awake but not awake, the thunder breathing visible as a yellow blur between the buildings, the specific electric signature of a boy who went somewhere else when the world got bad enough. And he saw Daki. Something about her was different from every demon he'd encountered. Not just the power, though the power was real and the sashes were everywhere, her obi extensions covering the district in cutting silk that nothing should have been able to move through. The difference was more fundamental. She was furious, fully and completely furious, not the calculated anger of something tactical but the raw, old rage of something that had been hurt so deeply and so early that the hurt had become the substance of it, that you couldn't separate the demon from the wound it had been made from. She turned and looked at Luffy on the rooftop. He looked back. "You're the rubber one," she said. Even her voice was hot, the specific temperature of someone who burned with it constantly. "The one who held Akaza-sama." "Yes," Luffy said. "He told us about you." She smiled, and it was beautiful and entirely without warmth. "He said you were interesting." "I'm flattered," Luffy said. "Don't be." The sashes came for him, 20, 30 of them, the cutting obi extensions, the ones that had sliced through a building's worth of walls already tonight. They hit him in a wave. He went through them the way he'd gone through Ray's web. His rubber body distributed the cutting force, the sharpness finding no purchase on elastic material, and he came out the other side and she stared. "Interesting," she said again, and this time it was the specific interesting of someone who'd encountered a new problem. He hit her. She went through a wall. Then another. Then a third, the impacts carrying her through the building's interior, and she came out the other side with the disoriented fury of something that hadn't been hit that cleanly since, maybe ever, at this level of force. She reformed. Regenerated. Her rage intensified, which Luffy hadn't thought was possible. They went back and forth across the rooftops. She was fast. Upper six fast, the speed of something that had been accumulating power for a very long time, and her sashes gave her reach that extended her physical presence to the entire district, every surface potentially a weapon. She hit him repeatedly with full force. He kept being there afterward. Each time she hit him and he stayed standing, something in her expression added a new layer to its fury, because being unable to hurt something was, to Daki, a specific and personal insult. "What are you?" she demanded mid-exchange. "I told Ray," Luffy said, dodging a sash sweep that took out the wall behind him. "Nobody you want as an enemy. Everyone is my enemy." "No," he said. He landed on a beam above her and looked down. "Everyone is afraid of you. That's different." She went still. The sashes stilled. It was the kind of still that came when something true lands without warning in a space that wasn't expecting it. She looked up at him with her beautiful, rageful face, and for a moment, just a moment, the rage had a seam in it, a crack where something else was visible underneath, the same way a fire showed its fuel if you looked at the right angle. "You're not afraid of me," she said. "No." "Why not?" "Because fear isn't the point," he said. "You're strong. I respect that. But fear," he shook his head. "Fear is what you use to keep people away. I've never cared about being away from things." She stared at him. And then the seam closed and the rage came back, hotter than before, the specific fury of something that had been seen and didn't know how to handle it. The real fight resumed. Luffy kept her occupied, kept her wholly occupied, the rubber body taking everything she threw and throwing back, the rooftops of the district becoming a secondary battleground while Yuzui and Jutaro fought their own war at the larger scale. The point wasn't to defeat Daki. Not alone, not without a blade that could finish it. The point was to hold her, the same way he'd held Akaza, keep her from helping her brother, keep her attention here, give the others what they needed. But Daki was not Akaza. Akaza was ancient and powerful and self-possessed. Daki was ancient and powerful and in agony, the wound that had made her so old it had become structural, and when she fought she poured everything into it, not technique but feeling, the sheer thermal output of someone who'd been burning for centuries. She caught him. Not with a sash, with her hand, the direct physical grip, and she was strong enough that even rubber had to negotiate with it, and she threw him, genuinely threw him, through 3 buildings and into the street below, the impact cratering the paving stones. He lay there for a second. Tanjiro appeared beside him. "Luffy!" He was checking for injuries with the rapid hands of someone who'd been watching the fight from below. "Luffy, can you?" "I'm fine." He sat up. Shook his head. "She's incredibly strong. Her brother is the real power," Tanjiro said. "Jutaro, Yuzui-san is—" He looked up at the upper district where the sound of Yuzui's fight was making the air vibrate. "We need to hit them simultaneously. Both heads at the same time. If one sees the other dying, they'll stop it." Luffy looked at the district. At the distributed fight. At the geometry of it. "Can you get to Jutaro?" he asked. "With Inosuke." "Yes." "Then go." He stood. "I'll keep Daki's attention." "Luffy, go, Tanjiro." Tanjiro looked at him for a half-second with the expression of someone accepting a gift they know the cost of. Then he went. Luffy went back up to the rooftops. Daki was already waiting. She tracked him down with the precision of something that was very angry and had a specific target for that anger. "I'm not done with you," she said. "Good," he said. "Because I'm not done either." They went again. This time he fought differently, not to hold her, not to occupy her, but to push her. He stopped absorbing and started pressing, forcing her backward across the rooftop, which she hadn't expected from something she'd thrown through 3 buildings. The reversal disoriented her instincts, built around a model of Luffy as the defensive element, and she was 3 exchanges behind the actual fight before she adjusted. He drove her to the edge of the rooftop. She reformed her sashes, trying to get space, and he closed the distance before the sashes could extend, getting inside her reach where the length of them was a disadvantage rather than a weapon. Up close, she was different. He could see her face without the distance of the fight, and what he saw was the seam again, the crack in the fury where the underneath showed. She was looking at him with the raw, exhausted look of something that had been angry for so long it had forgotten what the anger was protecting. "Why are you protecting him?" Luffy asked. He meant Jotaro. He'd seen the pattern, the way Daki's fury spiked whenever Jotaro's fight shifted, the way her attention tracked her brother's position across the district. She hit him. He took it. Stayed in front of her. "Why are you protecting him?" he asked again. "He's my brother," she snarled. "And he became a demon for you," Luffy said. "Because of what happened to you. Because he couldn't protect you." The sashes went slack. It was a 1-second lapse, the fury finding a gap it couldn't immediately fill, and in the gap was something that wasn't rage, something younger and smaller and profoundly, permanently sad. "He's always protected me," she said. And her voice was different. Not the demon's voice, but something underneath it, the voice from before, the one that was still in there because the person who'd become Daki had never quite stopped being Yumi, the girl who'd been hurt before she had the vocabulary for it. "I know," Luffy said. Not triumphant about knowing. Just acknowledging the fact of it, the same way he'd acknowledge everything else tonight. "Don't look at me like that," she said. The fury came back, thinner now, like paper over something hollow. You don't get to." The explosion from the upper district was enormous. Sound breathing, Yuzui's final form, the concussive output of everything he had, and in its wake a silence that meant something definitive had happened. Daki felt it in her body. She felt it the way Tanjiro had described, the connection between siblings that ran through the demon transformation, the shared substrate of what they were. She felt Jotaro's injury as her own, and the fury she'd been running on collapsed inward, the fuel suddenly wrong. She looked at Luffy with the eyes of something that had just understood the shape of the night. "All of you," she said. "Together." "Yes," Luffy said. She looked at him for a long moment. The sashes fell. All of them, everywhere, the obi extensions retracting, the weapons becoming cloth again, and Daki stood on the rooftop with nothing between her and the night, and her expression was the most human it had been since they started. "He was always there," she said. "Even before. When we were—" She stopped. "He was always there." "I know," Luffy said. She dissolved slowly, the way demons dissolved when the will to continue simply ran out, and as she went the thing that remained was younger and smaller, and had tears running down a face that was becoming less extraordinary and more human by the moment, and the last thing she said was her brother's name. Luffy stood on the rooftop after she was gone. He stood for a while. Below, the district was beginning to process what had happened, the debris, the surviving people, Yuzui's injured form being tended by his wives who'd appeared with the thoroughness of women who'd been in enough battles to know where to be afterward. Tanjiro was somewhere in it, and Zenitsu, and Inosuke making noise about something. Luffy sat on the rooftop's edge and looked at the sky. The stars were going out in the east, the pre-dawn doing what it did, and he thought about Rengoku and Akaza and the angle he'd found, and Daki and the seam in her fury and the girl underneath it, and the way all of these things were connected to the one thing at the center, Muzan Kibutsuji, who had made all of them, who had found people at their most breakable and broken them in specific ways that served his purposes. He thought about what Rengoku had said. That almost wasn't failure. That almost meant someone would. He thought about his crew. Not the dream version. The real ones, the specific warmth of real people, the arguments and the meals and the way Nami always knew where they were and Zoro never did, and the way they moved together in a fight, not because they were coordinated but because they each understood what the others needed without needing it explained. He'd been here long enough that here had become real. The Taisho Mountains and the cedar smell and Tanjiro's iron heart and Zenitsu's sleeping thunder and Inosuke's animal certainty, and now Yuzui's jeweled flamboyance, and the memory of Rengoku's fire and the girl in the box who'd given him a paper flower, and the knowledge that somewhere in the center of all of it was a man who'd decided to live forever by making everything else suffer for it. He was going to find that center. He'd known it since Urokodaki said the name the first night. He'd been walking toward it since. All the demons on all the mountains and the train and the district had been the path. He understood paths. He'd been walking them his whole life. Shinobu Kocho found him on the rooftop. She appeared without announcement, which, given that she was a Hashira, he supposed was professional standard, and she stood beside him with her hands folded and her butterfly hairpiece catching the first light and looked at the district below. She was smaller than he'd expected. The insect Hashira, whose poison-based techniques had become legendary in the Corps for their lethality despite the lack of the physical strength most Hashira operated with. She had a face built for smiling and the specific eyes of someone who smiled with the face and thought with something else entirely. She'd been watching for a while before she spoke. "You're the one Yuzi called," she said. "He didn't call. He made noise and I came. Semantically similar." She looked at him with those calculating eyes. "You held Daki. Long enough. Without a blade. Without breathing." She said each item the way you'd say items on a list you were compiling for a specific purpose. "Without any technique the Corps recognizes." "Yes. And on the Mugen train, you entered Enni's dream and broke it from the inside." "Yes. And before that, you cleared an upper six by occupying her while your allies handled the primary target." She paused. "And on empty Natagumo, you and Tanjiro Kamadu together injured Rei significantly enough that he couldn't prevent his own death." "Tanjiro killed Rei," Luffy said. "I helped." "That's a pattern," she said. He looked at her. She was not looking at him with suspicion exactly, more with the focused quality of someone running a calculation they haven't finished yet. "What pattern?" he asked. "You make it possible for others to do what they couldn't alone." She tilted her head. "But you also fight with a physical output that—" She paused, choosing words with the care of someone who understood that imprecision could be misleading. "I've reviewed the accounts from the other Hashira and the surviving slayers at each location. Your physical capability is, at minimum, upper moon comparable." "Probably," Luffy said. "And yet you always position yourself as support. You hold things while others make the kill. You break the dream while Rengoku manages the train. You occupy Daki while Tanjiro goes after Jotaro." She looked at him steadily. "Is that modesty?" "No," he said. "I can't kill demons efficiently without a blade. I found a technique that helps. It's not reliable enough to be the main plan." He shrugged. "So I'm the thing that makes the main plan possible." "That's fine." "It's more than fine," she said, and something in her voice had changed, not warmer exactly, but less professionally measured, the calculation giving way briefly to something that didn't need to compute. "Do you understand what you've been doing? To all of them?" "What?" "Tanjiro. Zenitsu. Inosuke." She looked at him. "They're performing at levels that make no sense for their ranks. Tanjiro used a 10th form at Mizunoto rank. Zenitsu is awake for his thunder breathing for longer stretches each mission. Inosuke's spatial awareness has expanded in ways that—" She stopped. "You're not teaching them anything. You're not training them or running drills. But something about the way you fight alongside them is, they do that," Luffy said. "I'm just there." "No," she said. "People fight differently when someone is present who is not afraid. Genuinely not afraid. It changes the fear chemistry of the whole field. They become more themselves." She looked out at the district. "I've studied this. I've studied it because—" A pause, small and precise. "I lost someone. To Doma. Upper 2. She said it without performance. "He is, too strong for any current Hashira alone. I've been looking for angles." Luffy looked at her. "The same way you found Akaza's angle," she said. "I study. I map patterns. I develop poisons that can harm demons that swords can't finish quickly enough." She turned to face him directly. "I want to ask you something and I want a direct answer." "Okay. Will you come to the butterfly estate? I want to understand your physical mechanics. Not to control them or replicate them. I doubt either is possible. But if I understand how your body interacts with demon techniques, I can develop better support strategies. Better poisons. Better angles. She looked at him with those precise eyes. You are the most unusual asset this Corps has encountered. I don't intend to waste unusual assets. Asset, Luffy said. Person. She corrected, smooth and immediate. Poor word choice. I apologize. He looked at her for a moment. She met his gaze without flinching, which not everyone managed. She was also, he noticed, the first person since Urokodaki who treated his physical nature as something to be understood rather than simply categorized as impressive. How long? He asked. A week. Then there's information about the Infinity Castle. About Musen's fortress. The Corps is preparing. Her voice was very level on this. When that move comes, it will be everything at once. No half measures. And you. She looked at him with a frankness that had stopped being professional and become personal. When that comes, you need to be at your best. I'm always at my best, he said. You're at your current best, she said. There's a difference. He stared at her. She stared back. Then he grinned. You're direct. Life is short, she said. Demon poison makes it shorter. She said it like a joke that was also completely true. Will you come? He thought about it for exactly as long as it took to think about it genuinely. Yeah, he said. I'll come. She looked briefly, quietly relieved, the expression of someone who'd been holding a question for a while and was glad to put it down. She turned to go, butterfly hairpiece catching the full sunrise now, the light making it look like it was actually moving. Shinobu, he said. She paused. The upper two, he said. Doma. She didn't turn around. Her shoulders did something controlled. I'll look for his angle, Luffy said. She was quiet for 3 full seconds. Thank you, she said. Her voice was very level. She went down the rooftop the way she'd arrived, without announcement, without drama, the efficiency of someone who'd learned to move through the world as lightly as possible because she understood what weight cost. Luffy sat on the rooftop edge. He thought about Rengoku's fire. About Shinobu's precision. About Tanjiro's iron and Zenitsu's thunder, and Inosuke's beast and Nezuko in her box with the paper flower. He thought about the Infinity Castle and Musen Kibutsuji, and the account that wasn't closed. The sun came fully up. He put his hat on properly. Below, the district was waking up to a world that still had demons in it but had slightly fewer than yesterday, and in the wreckage of the upper quarter a jeweled hand raised in the specific gesture of someone who was injured and fine about it, and wanted everyone to know both. Luffy dropped off the rooftop into the street. He called toward the hand. Yuzi! You alive? Flamboyantly, came the reply. Good, Luffy said. I'm hungry. Someone find food. Tanjiro's voice, from somewhere in the debris. How are you hungry right now? I'm always hungry, Luffy said. Come on. We have a week before things get serious. They came. All of them, battered and tired and alive, assembling out of the wreckage of the night the way his crew assembled out of whatever wreckage they'd been in, finding each other by the simple reliable fact of being people who looked for each other. He looked at them. He thought, almost is not failure. Almost means it's possible. He thought someone will. He'd already decided who. Chapter 6. The King of Demons and the King of Pirates. The Infinity Castle arrived without warning. One moment they were in the open air, the Hashira, the Slayers, Luffy standing among them in the space outside the city where the Corps had gathered its full weight for the first time in a generation, and the next the world folded. Not like the Grand Line storm that had brought him here, not chaotic or accidental. This was deliberate, the specific folding of a thing that had been practicing for a very long time, and the air went wrong and the ground went vertical and the castle swallowed them. Luffy landed on a wall. Stood on it. Looked around. The Infinity Castle was not a building in any sense that the word was built to contain. It was space-given architecture, rooms that connected to other rooms through angles that geography couldn't justify, staircases that went sideways and arrived somewhere above where they'd started, corridors that narrowed and widened with the logic of a living thing's breathing. It was beautiful in the specific way that dangerous things were beautiful, the way the Grand Line was beautiful, the scale of it, the complete indifference to human frameworks. Luffy had been on the Thousand Sunny in the Grand Line for years. He oriented in 4 seconds. Around him, the sounds of the castle dispersing its occupants, the crash and shout of Hashira landing in various configurations, the distant specific percussion of Inosuke immediately finding something to fight, Zenitsu's voice going from panic to silent in the way that meant he'd arrived at his threshold. Tanjiro's breathing pattern, close, 12 feet, maybe 15, the steady water-breathing rhythm of someone who'd found his feet and was reading his environment. "Tanjiro," Luffy said. "Here." He appeared around a corner that shouldn't have been where it was. His blade was drawn. His eyes were doing the thing, reading, the smell gift working through the castle's unnatural air. "The demons are already moving. I can smell, there are a lot of them. Many directions. Where's Nezuko?" Tanjiro's face. "She was, when the castle took us, she was separated. The box." He controlled it hard. "She can handle herself. She knows this world better than I have to trust that." "She's okay," Luffy said. "You don't know that. She's Nezuko," he said. Same certainty he'd had from the first night in the snow. "She's okay." Tanjiro held his gaze for a moment. Then he breathed, and the breathing was correct, and he nodded. "Muzan," he said. "He'll be at the center." Everything in this castle is radiating outward from him. The demons are arranged in layers, the outer ones first, the upper moons deeper. He'll be at the absolute center. He looked at Luffy. "The Hashira are fighting their way through. We're supposed to go deeper," Luffy said. "It's dangerous. The upper moon's between us and Tanjiro." "A beat." "Yeah," Tanjiro said. "Deeper." They went. The castle moved around them as they traveled. Not randomly, with intention, the architecture responding to their movement the way a living body responded to something foreign moving through it. Rooms rotated to create dead ends that hadn't been there. Staircases reversed their direction mid-climb. Corridors lengthened ahead of them with the patient malice of something that understood the value of making you run further to get to the same place. Luffy walked through all of it with the same pace. When a corridor lengthened, he stretched his legs and covered it in 3 strides. When a room rotated, he moved with it, his balance accommodating the shift the way it accommodated the deck of a ship in bad water. When a staircase reversed, he walked along the underside because the underside was now the floor. Tanjiro ran beside him and stopped noticing the castle's tricks because Luffy's complete disinterest in them made them ambient rather than threatening. They found Doma's domain in the castle's mid-layer. Not by following directions. By smell. Tanjiro stopped them both at a corridor junction with the specific stillness of someone whose nose had just received information requiring processing. "Ice," Tanjiro said. "Frozen. And something underneath it." "Something." His brow furrowed. "It smells empty. Like something that should have warmth doesn't." Luffy had already turned toward the corridor on the left. "Shinobu," Tanjiro said. "She came here for I know. Luffy, Doma is upper too. Even with both of us, I told her I'd look for his angle," Luffy said. He was already walking. "Stay close." The cold hit them before the door. Not mountain cold or winter cold, something more deliberate, a cold that had been constructed rather than arrived at naturally. The specific temperature of something that had decided cold was the appropriate atmosphere for itself and arranged its environment accordingly. The corridor's walls had frost on them. The ceiling dripped something that had been water, and then reconsidered. The room beyond the door was enormous and white and wrong. Doma occupied the center of it with the ease of a thing that had never needed to work for its space. He was beautiful in the way certain very dangerous things were, the fan in his hand moving in slow arcs, his robes pristine, his hair pale and his eyes rainbow-hued and his smile the most thoroughly convincing performance of contentment Luffy had ever seen. And it was a performance. That was the thing Luffy had sat on the entertainment district rooftop thinking about, the thing Shinobu had described when she said empty. Doma was the most technically convincing human he'd met in this world, the most fluent in the gestures of warmth and care and joy, and every single piece of it was assembled from observation rather than experience. He was an architect of feeling who had never lived in any of the buildings he'd designed. Shinobu was in the room. She was still standing, which Luffy took as a positive sign before he registered the rest of it. The pallor, the way she was breathing, the specific color of someone who's been poisoned by something that's also metabolizing the poison faster than it can work. She'd done it deliberately. He understood this in one look. She'd let him consume her, laced herself with concentrated wisteria poison in quantities that would have been fatal to her regardless, gambling everything on the poison being in him when the moment arrived. Doma looked at her with his beautiful, empty smile. "Your friend has arrived," he told her, pleasantly. "Two of them, actually. I can smell the water boy." His rainbow eyes moved to the doorway where Luffy and Tanjiro appeared. "And the rubber one." The smile didn't change. "I've been curious about you." "I know," Luffy said. "Akaza told Daki. Daki's gone." Something crossed Doma's face. A flicker, gone so fast it barely registered. "Daki." He said the name with the specific flatness of someone who'd known someone for a long time and hadn't actually known them at all. "She was fierce. Loyal." He tilted his head. "I'm not sure I'll miss her. I'm not sure I miss anything." He said it with the tone of someone reporting a curious physical symptom rather than confessing something profound. "I've wondered about that. Whether I should be able to miss things and simply don't. Or whether the capacity was never there." He looked at Luffy. "You know, I think. You love things. It's visible on you. What does it feel like? What does what feel like? Missing. Caring. The. He made a gesture with the fan. The investment. The weight of other people." He looked genuinely curious. Genuinely, and it was the most honest thing about him. "I've absorbed thousands of people. I've had their memories, their feelings, their last moments, and I cannot replicate what I've observed in you in a single conversation. You love your crew. You love these people." He indicated Tanjiro. "It changes how you move. How you fight. I've never experienced that." "No," Luffy said. "You haven't. Does that make me lesser?" Again, the tone of someone asking a technical question, not a vulnerable one. "Yes," Luffy said. Plainly. Without cruelty but without softening. "It does." Doma looked at him. The fan slowed. "Most people," he said, "say something more careful than that." "I'm not careful," Luffy said. "I'm honest." "You're going to try to kill me?" Doma said. "Yes." "Even knowing I'm upper two. Even knowing what I am." "You hurt Shinobu," Luffy said. "And before her, someone else she loved. And before that, thousands of people. And you don't even feel bad about it because you can't feel bad about anything." He walked forward into the room. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard and also the reason I'm going to put you down." Doma looked at him with those rainbow eyes for a moment. Then he laughed, and the laugh was also technically perfect, the right cadence, the right timbre, and completely hollow. "I do find you interesting," he said. "You're the only person who's made me want to understand something I can't understand." The fan moved. "Let's see if I can take that from you before you end me." The room went white. Cryogenic flower petals. That was what Doma's blood demon art produced. The lotus flowers, the fans, the mist that froze the lungs, the shards of crystal ice that fell like snow and cut like blades. He moved through his own cold with the ease of its creator, and everything he generated filled the space with the specific hazard of beauty that wanted to kill you. Luffy moved. The ice touched him and he absorbed the cold the way he absorbed impact, not without feeling it, but distributing it across a larger surface, his rubber body resisting the crystallization that would have locked a normal person's joints. He was slower in the cold, that was true, the elasticity of rubber dropping with temperature, but slower for Luffy was still not slow, and he came through the white cloud of lotus petals at a speed that made Doma's first redirect a half-second late. He hit Doma. The upper two went back, actually back, the way Rui had gone back, the impact landing and physics acknowledging it, and landed on his feet 12 feet away with his perfect composure rearranged slightly. "You can touch me," Doma said. He sounded interested. "Yes," Luffy said. "The ice doesn't stop you. It slows me." "Not enough. Shinobu's poison is in me," Doma said, almost informatively. "I'm metabolizing it. It will." He paused. Something happened in his face, very subtle. "It will take longer than I expected." "Good," Luffy said. Tanjiro came in from the left, water breathing flowing into the forms with the full output of everything he had, the water pattern moving clean and fast and continuous, not any single form but all of them, the connected river of the whole style, Urokodaki's 2 months of mountain training arriving at its purpose. His blade found Doma repeatedly, the cuts real and damaging, and Doma healed them, but healing required energy and energy was being spent on metabolizing Shinobu's poison and the arithmetic was working, slowly, the way slow arithmetic did, not dramatically but steadily, each round of healing slightly less immediate than the last. Doma fought both of them simultaneously and he was good enough to do it, genuinely good, the techniques of upper two not just powerful but intelligent, the cold and the petals and the fans generating three-dimensional hazard fields that accounted for multiple attack vectors at once. He was the most technically refined fighter Luffy had encountered in this world, every motion purposeful and efficient and beautiful in its functionality. He had no angle. Not the way Akaza had an angle, the quarter he always attacked from, the pattern beneath the pattern. Doma had no pattern because Doma had no emotion driving his movement, and emotion was what created pattern. He was pure calculation, and pure calculation adapted, and adapting required no repetition. Luffy recognized this in the third exchange and revised. He stopped looking for the angle and started making one. He let Doma hit him. Not just absorbing, actually letting the full force land, staging the impact to read where maximum force came from, feeding Doma the information that his hits were working while actually calibrating Luffy's response. He staggered when he didn't need to. He retreated when he could have pressed. He gave Doma a model of Luffy that was slightly less than the truth, and Doma, who processed everything as information rather than feeling, updated his model and began to operate from it. Tanjiro saw it. He didn't say anything, he just adjusted his own attack pattern in response, taking more of Doma's attention as Luffy appeared to manage less of it, and Doma redistributed his focus accordingly. 3 more exchanges. Luffy watching the model Doma was running, the calculation in those rainbow eyes, the specific confidence of something that had updated its estimates, and now knew the shape of the fight. Then he stopped performing the model. He came at full speed, the gear second acceleration, the blood pumping faster, the shimmering heat of it rising around him, and Doma saw it coming and his calculation said this is the peak of what it can do based on observed performance, and generated a defense calibrated to that. The defense was wrong. Because what Doma had observed was the floor, not the ceiling. Luffy hit him with everything, not the concentrated edge technique, not the neck strike, but straight impact, the full accelerated output of a body that had been holding back without knowing it was holding back, had never in this world been pushed past the comfortable middle range because nothing here had required it yet. The impact didn't just send Doma back. It sent him through the wall. Through the next room. Through the wall of the next room after that. The castle shook. Plaster and ancient wood rained down. Something in the Infinity Castle's architecture groaned and adjusted, the building's living geometry recognizing a significant internal event. Luffy walked through the holes in the walls without breaking his stride. Doma was in the third room, standing. He was standing because he was upper 2 and standing was what upper 2 did, but something about the way he was standing had changed. The composure slightly less absolute, the fan still, the rainbow eyes looking at Luffy with an expression that was not quite fear but was the closest thing to it that something without the capacity for fear could generate. "You were holding back," Doma said. "No," Luffy said. He walked through the hole in the third wall and stopped in front of him. I just never had a reason to go further before. You're the reason. Doma stopped. Something moved through his face that was entirely unfamiliar to it, not the performed emotions, not the calculated warmth, or the aesthetic interest. Something that was arriving from somewhere he hadn't known was there. She's everywhere, he said. What? Shinobu. He looked at his hands. The poison was visible in him now, the effects advancing faster, the Wisteria's chemistry moving through a system that was spending everything it had left on healing and couldn't fight on all fronts at once. She's in the air. She's in me. He looked up. She was thinking of someone. At the end. She was thinking of someone and it was so. He stopped again. Something was happening in his face that he didn't have vocabulary for. Is this what it feels like? Tanjiro appeared beside Luffy. He was looking at Doma and he was breathing, the breathing controlled, his eyes wet and his blade still. Is this grief? Doma asked. He sounded genuinely lost. Not performing the lostness, actually lost, arriving at an experience his centuries of existence had never managed to deliver. Yes, Tanjiro said. It's awful, Doma said. Yes, Tanjiro said. She wanted me to feel this. He said it with something approaching wonder. This was the point. Not just the poison. She wanted. He looked at his hands. She gave everything so that I would feel, for one moment, what I'd taken from everyone else. Luffy stood in front of him and said nothing. I understand, Doma said. His voice was quieter now. The petals around him were dropping, the cold receding, the blood demon art losing its architecture as the body that generated it ran out of what it needed. I think I understand now what I never had. The rainbow eyes went still. He dissolved slowly, gracefully, with the specific quality of something putting itself down rather than being put down, and what came out of the dissolution was not the beautiful empty face but something older and more real, a child's face, a confused face, something that had arrived in the world without the equipment for it, and had spent centuries performing what it couldn't feel. He was gone. Luffy stood in the cold room that was warming now, the frost receding from the walls, and looked at the space where Doma had been. She got him, Tanjiro said. His voice was careful. She did, Luffy said. She planned this. The whole thing. Yes. Tanjiro was quiet for a moment. We need to keep moving. Yes, Luffy said. He didn't move immediately. He looked at the space where Doma had been for one more second, not for Doma, for the woman who'd carried her grief into a demon's body as a weapon and trusted that it would land. You found his angle, he thought. Then he turned. Let's go. The center of the Infinity Castle was nothing like the rest of it. The outer rooms were elaborate, layered, the architecture of something that had time to be theatrical. The center was simple. A space without ceiling, or a ceiling so far above it was indistinguishable from open sky, with a floor of polished dark stone and columns that went up until they became shadow. Muzan Kibutsuji stood in the center of it. Luffy stopped in the entrance. He looked at Muzan the way he'd looked at every enemy that mattered, completely, without the framework of what he was supposed to see. And what he saw was a man. Not impressive looking, not physically dominant, not radiating the obvious overwhelming presence of the powerful enemies he'd faced. Just a man in white, pale and composed, with the bearing of something that had existed so long it had stopped needing to perform its power because its power was simply ambient. His eyes were red. They moved to Luffy immediately, with the specific quality of attention that recognized something it hadn't planned for. Around him, other demons, the remaining upper moons, arranged with the spatial awareness of generals around a king. The Hashira were already in the space, or arriving in it, the sounds of fighting in the adjacent corridors still ongoing. This was the convergence point. This was where everything had been heading. Muzan looked at Luffy for a long moment. You, he said. You're not a demon slayer. No, Luffy said. You're not from this world. No. Muzan's expression didn't change. It was the specific stillness of something that had processed too much across too long a time to register surprise as most beings experienced it. But something moved in those red eyes, a recalculation, swift and deep. "I've been informed of you," he said. "By demons who are no longer available to inform me of anything." A pause. "Rui. Enmu. Daki and Jotaro together. Doma." He said each name with the flat precision of an accountant reading a loss column. "You were present at each loss." "Yes," Luffy said. "And Akaza. You found an angle on Akaza." He said this with the tone of someone for whom this was the most remarkable item on the list. "No one has found an angle on Akaza." "He has one," Luffy said. "He just never met anyone who watched him carefully enough." Muzan looked at him. "What do you want?" "For this to stop," Luffy said. He meant the demons, the deaths, the Kamadu family and Rengoku and Shinobu and all the unnamed ones before them. He meant it the way he always meant things, completely. "It won't stop," Muzan said. "Simply. Without malice. Just information. I've existed for over 1,000 years. I've survived every effort this Corps has made. I've survived sunlight, poison, the best blades this country has produced." He tilted his head. "What makes you believe this moment is different?" "Because of them," Luffy said. He didn't gesture. He didn't indicate. He meant Tanjiro beside him and the Hashira moving through the castle and Zenitsu somewhere in the structure running his thunder and Inosuke with his beast's breathing tearing through whatever was between him and here. He meant all of them together, the specific gravity of people who'd been walking toward this center for years. "People," Muzan said, and the word had weight in his voice, the particular weight of something that had been studying people for 1,000 years and had arrived at a specific conclusion. "I made myself what I am to escape the weakness of people. Sickness. Death. The crushing limitation of a life measured in decades." His expression didn't change, but something in his voice did, something very slightly less composed, the way a long-held thing shifts when you've been holding it too long. "I am free of all of it. I feel nothing you feel. I want nothing you want. I cannot be grieved, or threatened, or reasoned with." "I know," Luffy said. "And yet you're here." "Yes." Muzan's red eyes moved over him with the thoroughness of someone who'd made a career of understanding human weakness and was applying that understanding now, looking for the leverage point, the crack, the thing that could be pressed to make Luffy into something manageable. He looked for a long time. "You have no leverage point," Muzan said. Not frustrated, just accurate. "Most humans, there's always something. Fear of death. Love of specific people. Ambition. Pride." He listed these the way you'd list tools in a kit. "You have love, but it's not the kind I can threaten. It's not conditional or afraid. You feel it, but it doesn't make you fragile." He paused. "I've broken people by threatening what they loved. It doesn't work on you." "No," Luffy agreed. "Because you trust them," Muzan said, and something in his voice was almost, not quite, but almost, curious in the way Doma had been curious, the genuine incomprehension of something that had catalogued human behavior for a millennium and still didn't understand this specific mechanism. "You trust that they're strong. That they'll survive. That they'll be there." He looked at Luffy. "How can you be certain of that?" "I'm not," Luffy said. "But I believe it." "That's different. Belief without certainty," Muzan said. "That's the definition of a vulnerability. That's the definition of love," Luffy said. "You've been alive for 1,000 years. You've watched millions of people. And you still don't know the difference." The stillness in Muzan's face changed. Not dramatically. Not visibly to anyone who wasn't looking carefully. But Luffy was looking carefully, and what he saw was the thing underneath the millennium of composure, not anger, something older. Something that had been in the man named Muzan Kibutsuji before the demon, before the 1,000 years, when he'd been sick and dying and a doctor had given him something that saved his life and changed it into something he hadn't entirely chosen. Something that had been searching, for a very long time, for an argument that would resolve. There wasn't one. He'd eaten thousands of people looking for one. "We're going to end this," Luffy said. "Not because we're certain we can. Because we're here, and you're here, and someone has to." Muzan moved. He was the fastest thing Luffy had ever been hit by. The speed was not comparable to Akaza or Doma or any upper moon. It was something beyond the scale those comparisons existed on, the speed of something that had spent 1,000 years refining its physical capability with no upper limit imposed on it by the human body's ceiling. He crossed the space between them and the hit landed before Luffy's perception had fully registered the motion. Luffy went through a column. The column was thick stone and it stopped being a column and became rubble, and Luffy came through the rubble on the other side and landed on his feet. He took a breath. Shook his head. Tanjiro's blade was already in motion from the left. The response to Muzan's move, the water breathing flowing into the intercept pattern, the blade finding the spaces Muzan's speed left behind it the way water found spaces behind rocks. Muzan redirected it without looking, one hand, not breaking the motion. Tanjiro went back. Came up. Went again. The Hashira arrived. Not in a wave, in the specific coordinated way of people who'd been fighting toward this room from different directions and were arriving with the timing of something planned, the result of strategy, and the particular grace of arriving before you were expected rather than when you were. Himejima from one entrance, Mitsuri from another, Abanai from the third, each with their own style and their own wounds from the castle's layers and their own absolute refusal to stop. Muzan assessed the new geometry in the same moment it changed and adapted, because 1,000 years of survival had made adaptation the deepest reflex he had. He was extraordinarily powerful. He was also, Luffy realized, afraid. Not of any individual in the room. Of the specific configuration of all of them together, the thing he'd spent 1,000 years preventing, everyone who should have been separated by his castle's maze arriving at the same point at the same time. His techniques became more expansive, the whip tendril attacks that covered more space, the blood demon art generating wider fields rather than precise strikes, the behavior of something that was trying to keep everything at distance rather than engaging specifically. He was managing the room. Not dominating it. Managing it. Luffy saw this and moved toward him. Not in a line, Muzan would redirect a line. He moved in the way he'd moved through Rue's web and Doma's ice and every obstacle in the castle, the non-linear path that made prediction a step behind. He came from angles, bounced off surfaces, used the rubble of the column as ground cover, closed the distance in increments too small for Muzan's adaptation to address individually. He got close. Muzan looked at him. And Luffy saw it very clearly, the calculation running, the 1,000-year library of human weakness being consulted, finding nothing applicable. "You're going to hit me again," Muzan said. "Yes," Luffy said. "It won't be enough." "Probably not by itself," Luffy agreed. Then he hit him. The gear's second output, the full acceleration, the focus strike, and Muzan took it, and moved with it, spreading the impact with the specific skill of something that had learned to manage force long before Luffy was born. He moved back 12 feet. Stopped. Was already healing whatever the impact had done. "As I said," Muzan began. Tanjiro came from his left. Himejima from behind. Abanai from above. Mitsuri from the right. All at once, the coordinated strike, everyone moving to the positions Luffy's hit had arranged, the impact that pushed Muzan backward, opening the angles for the next 60 seconds of the fight the way a first move opened a board. Muzan moved through all of them. He was fast enough to do it. He took damage doing it, real damage, the Hashira's blades finding him repeatedly, Tanjiro's water finding the spaces between his defenses, the wounds slowing his adaptation by fractions. He came back into the center of the room, and something had changed. The composure was still there. The millennium of it. But underneath it, visible now, was the thing Luffy had seen in the first moment, the search, the fundamental unresolvable search for the argument that would end the searching. "You can't win," Muzan said. He said it to the room. To all of them. "We know," Tanjiro said. He was bleeding from a cut across his shoulder, and his water breathing was at full output, and his eyes were completely steady. We know we might not. We're here anyway. Muzan looked at him. At the iron in him, the specific Tanjiro iron, the thing that had walked up a demon-infested mountain for love and hadn't stopped walking. You're the boy from the mountain, Muzan said. Something moved in his red eyes. The Kamadu family. Yes, Tanjiro said. I don't remember them, Muzan said. Without apology. A simple statement of how vast his accounting was, how many entries the ledger held. There have been so many. I know, Tanjiro said. I know you don't. He breathed. Water. River. The pattern complete. That's why I'm here. Because you didn't remember. Because to you they were nothing. I'm here to make you remember that they were everything. Muzan stared at him. Luffy moved. He came from behind while Muzan's attention was on Tanjiro, the full acceleration, and what he did was not a strike, he grabbed. Both arms, the same grip he'd used on Akaza, finding the elbow joints and pulling the arms apart, opening the center line, and then he locked them there with everything he had, both rubber arms wrapped around Muzan's, immovable, his feet planted and his entire body anchoring the position. Muzan felt it. He felt the grip that didn't give, the rubber that had no joint to break and no tension to leverage against, and he turned the full weight of his strength against it, and Luffy's feet drove into the stone floor, cracking it, and he held on. Now, he said. Tanjiro was already in the motion. Not the 10th form. Something past the 10th form. Something that had never had a name because Tanjiro hadn't known it existed until this moment. The thing that lived on the other side of everything Urokodaki had taught him. The place you arrived when you burned through every technique you had and kept going because the people behind you required it. The water in the blade was not water anymore. It was something older and more fundamental, the element underneath the technique, the thing the technique had always been pointing toward. The sun, Yorichi's sun, the original breathing that had nearly killed Muzan once before, arriving now in the hands of a boy who smelled of cedar fires and mountain air, and the specific grief of someone who had loved and lost and was still, somehow, full of love. Muzan saw it coming. He turned the full weight of his ancient body against Luffy's grip and the floor cracked deeper and Luffy's arms stretched and screamed and held and he thought about Rengoku saying set it ablaze and Shinobu's quiet certainty and Nezuko's paper flower and his crew, his real crew, Zoro and Nami and Usopp and Sanji and Robin, real and warm and waiting, and the grip held. The blade found Muzan's neck. It found it the way the sun found the horizon, inevitable, the arrival of something that had always been coming, and in the connection between blade and neck was the full output of a boy who'd been walking toward this moment since he carried his sister up a mountain in the snow. The silence in the room was total. Muzan was still. Not because the next strike had been instantaneously fatal. He was healing, the regeneration starting, but slower now, much slower. The accumulated damage of the fight and the castle's battles running through a system that had limits after all, the limits of something that had almost made itself infinite but had gotten almost where it needed absolutely. He looked at Luffy. Luffy looked back. They were very close. The grip still held. The wound was healing but the healing was wrong, incomplete, the regeneration stalling at a point it should have passed. You held me, Muzan said. His voice had changed. Something had gone out of it, the composure finally, genuinely absent. You both. He looked at the blade still in contact with his neck. At Tanjiro's face. At the light coming from the wound that was not healing fast enough. It doesn't have to have been personal, Luffy said quietly. Muzan looked at him. You don't remember the Kamadu family. You never knew Rengoku. You never knew Shinobu's sister, or Zenitsu's master, or anyone Inosuke lost in those mountains. He looked at Muzan steadily. But they were real. Every one of them. And the fact that you don't remember doesn't make them less real. It makes you less real. Muzan was quiet for a very long moment. I only wanted to live, he said. And for the first time in the entire night, the statement contained something that wasn't information or calculation or threat. Something that was just, true, and old, and tired. I know, Luffy said. Everything I've done, I know, Luffy said again. And it was still wrong. The light from the wound was spreading now, the specific light that breathing technique generated when the body producing it was fully committed to its own sun, and Tanjiro's arm was shaking with the output, but his arm was not stopping, the iron in him holding past the point where physical endurance explained it. Muzan felt the light reach something. Something fundamental, something that the 1,000 years had built on top of and couldn't fully protect. Something at the very origin, the first night, the medicine, the doctor's face, the specific fear of a sick man who hadn't wanted to die. He looked at Luffy. Is this what it's like? He asked. At the end. Is this what people feel? Luffy thought about it honestly. I don't know, he said. I've never been at the end. He looked at Muzan with the complete, direct attention he'd given him since the beginning. But you're not alone. That might be something. Muzan looked at him. The red eyes read him, the full library of human behavior, 1,000 years of observation, all of it brought to bear on the person in front of him. And found nothing but exactly what was there. A boy who meant what he said. The light completed what it had started. Muzan Kibutsuji, the first demon, the origin and the source and the 1,000-year weight of everything the core had carried, came apart slowly in the castle's center room, and the castle itself responded, the Infinity Castle, built by his will and maintained by it, beginning to go still around its edges, the architecture losing the intention that had made it architecture, becoming simply stone and wood and the ruins of something enormous. The room was very quiet. Then Tanjiro sat down on the floor because his legs stopped being available for standing, and Himejima lowered his flails, and Mitsuri made a sound that was half laugh and half sob, and Abanai stood very still with his hand on his blade and his eyes on the space where Muzan had been. Luffy released his grip. His arms snapped back. He shook them out, checking, bruised along the bone in ways that would be interesting for a few days, but intact. Rubber held. He looked at the space. He looked at all of them, the surviving Hashira, Tanjiro on the floor, the sounds of the castle settling around them. He sat down next to Tanjiro. Hey, he said. Hey, Tanjiro said. They sat in the rubble of the Infinity Castle's center room while the enormous structure around them gently, gradually, became less infinite, and the light came in through gaps in the stone where the castle's geometry was simplifying itself back into something that could exist without its architect. Nezuko, Tanjiro said. She's okay, Luffy said. You still don't know that. I still know that. Tanjiro looked at him. Then he laughed, not the surprised, rusty laugh from the first night's fire, but something full and present and genuinely found, the laugh of someone who'd come through the other side of something enormous and found that laughter was still available to them. You're impossible, Tanjiro said. People say that a lot, Luffy agreed. Nezuko came through the castle's eastern collapse 20 minutes later, walking through the settling dust with the muzzle gone, the bamboos simply absent, because somewhere in the castle's night she had fought her own battle and the thing she'd been fighting toward, the long gradual return of herself to herself, had arrived without ceremony. She walked through the dust and the settling stone, and she found her brother sitting in the rubble with Luffy beside him, and she ran. She ran the way people ran toward things they'd been trying to reach for a very long time, and she hit Tanjiro with both arms and he caught her, and they stayed like that while the castle came down around them in pieces, either of them in any condition to move and neither of them interested in moving. Luffy watched this. He felt something happening in his chest, not grief, not happiness exactly. Something in between, something that didn't have a clean name, the feeling of being present for a moment that mattered without being the center of it. The specific warmth of a witness. Nezuko pulled back from Tanjiro and looked at Luffy. She reached out and touched his hat. The same way she touched it on the mountain path, the very first day. Then she pulled her hand back and pointed at herself. Her mouth moved. Nezuko, she said. Not the excavated half-word of the first night. Clean. Present. Her own. Then she pointed at him. Luffy, she said. He grinned. Yeah, he said. That's right. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her brother. They found Zenitsu asleep in a corridor that was actively collapsing, which was almost impressive in its commitment to inconvenient timing. Inosuke was in the corridor next to it, loudly victorious about something, which Luffy took as confirmation that both of them were fine without needing to check. The surviving Hashira gathered at the castle's exterior as the structure came down, slowly, almost politely, the Infinity Castle making its exit with the dignity of something that had never been anything as modest as a building and was not going to pretend otherwise at the end. They stood in the cooling air and the pre-dawn dark and looked at what they'd done and what it had cost. Himejima sat with his face to the sky. Abanai leaned against the remains of a wall and breathed. Mitsuri sat with her long hair loose and her head down, and was very quiet. Yuzui appeared from the trees, injured, supported by his wives, jeweled and battered and unmistakably alive. He looked at the castle. He looked at the gathered survivors. He raised his hand. "Flamboyant!" he announced, into the pre-dawn quiet. Mitsuri laughed. Then Abanai. Then, incredibly, Himejima, a low, warm sound that didn't seem like it should fit in his chest but did. Luffy looked at them all. At the light coming up at the horizon. He thought about the thousand sunny. About the Grand Line. About the specific smell of sea air and the sound of Nami shouting coordinates, and the way the crew moved through a world that was enormous and dangerous and completely, unreservedly worth sailing. He thought about Rengoku. About what fire stayed in after the flame. He thought about almost isn't failure. Almost means it's possible. He thought someone will. He'd been that someone. They all had. Together. Tanjiro appeared beside him, Nezuko at his shoulder. They stood and looked at the lightning sky, the three of them, and then Zenitsu stumbling out of the trees and taking in the castle's state with the expression of someone who'd missed some things and was processing the scale of what, exactly, he'd missed. Inosuke behind him, blades in hand, looking at the collapsed castle with the betrayed expression of someone who'd wanted more of it to be left to fight. They stood together as the sun came up. Full and gold and completely indifferent to the night it was ending, the way suns were, the way good things tended to be, present without needing to be thanked for it, warm simply because that was what they were. Luffy felt it on his face. Tipped his head up toward it. "Hey," Tanjiro said. What happens now?" "For you." Luffy thought about it. "I find my crew," he said. "Eventually. I always do." He looked at the horizon. "And between now and eventually." He grinned, the full one, the one that had been there on the first night in the snow and hadn't changed in everything that had followed. "I'm hungry. Someone should make breakfast." Zenitsu made a sound of profound agreement. Inosuke demanded to know why breakfast came before combat. Nezuko made the sound that meant laughing. Tanjiro shook his head and smiled, the full one, not the iron one, not the grief one, not the determined one, but the actual smile underneath all of those, the one that had been working its way back since the first night's fire. "There's a village," he said. 20 minutes. They'll have food. Lead the way," Luffy said. He fell into step beside Tanjiro. Nezuko on the other side. The others behind them, Zenitsu and Inosuke arguing about something that had already escalated past its initial premise. The surviving Hashira beginning to move, the morning organizing itself around the fact of them still being in it. The sun came up over the mountains. The cedar trees caught the light and held it, the way good things held things, not forever, but for now, for this specific morning that was entirely itself and would not come again. Long enough. Luffy walked with his crew. Not his crew from the sea. But people, real people, who'd been through things together that put them in the same category, the category Luffy had always had space for, the one that didn't have a rule about how you joined or how many could fit. He walked with his hat on and the sunrise in his face, and the company of people who'd chosen to keep going, and he was exactly where he was supposed to be. For now.